Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway. I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went and we'd run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was... I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out in the pond. I know it's a black mirror. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
Jamie Clossick, welcome to the Nash podcast, mate, and thank you for inviting me to your lovely home.
Hello, welcome to my house.
You're a dab hand at this, mate. I feel like I'm in the presence of the master, mate, having started the old Carp Cast, mate. I've followed on your mantle, mate, into slightly more recent times.
I never had this equipment. You've got flashing lights and buttons and LED meters and multiple cameras. I never had any of this.
It don't do anything, mate, that. It's just purely for show, mate.
Yeah.
How have you been recently? Good?
Yeah, it's life's getting a bit better. Had a bit of a tough year last year, but this year's been pretty good. You might have seen that little poker win in November, which took the pressure off life a bit.
Little poker win. I love that.
The 50-year-old hedonist that's never worried too much about his retirement, and all of a sudden started panicking a bit, and as is usually the way, I did play poker professionally for a year a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, but realised my old brain couldn't keep up with young me, which the equivalent of young me. So I kind of stopped, just went back to playing for fun. I'd done some studying, was, better than the average person. Then I ended up winning the biggest online tournament every week, the Sunday Million, just before I moved to Slovenia. So I got a nicer house in Slovenia than I was going to get. Typically when you don't need the money and when you're not desperate, like, something good happened. And then the same things kind of just happened in November. I won in fact, it's up there. I'll get it in a minute as a little trophy, that glass blue thing. My first ever proper trophy, live poker. And I won like the biggest GUKPT, which is the Grosvenor Poker Tour. And the biggest one they'd ever had in England, in my home casino in Blackpool. So it was just like, wow, thank you very much.
That's epic, mate, that is.
Yeah, it was nice. So yeah, life's a little bit better than last year.
Fishing wise, what, you did anything recently or not really?
Yeah, so I had a couple of sessions on Grenville over the winter. Lucky enough to have a ticket starting in June. Had a few fish. You know what Grenville's like. You've got a session coming up there soon. So if they're under 50, they're normally beautiful and scaly. So I think the smallest fish I've had's been about 35, and the biggest was 51. Did a couple of sessions over the winter, and I think I've had like 7 or 8 fish, something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm very excited to have a ticket, and I probably won't get a chance to fish it till the autumn, but once I do, I haven't done any regular UK fishing for quite a lot of years now. Obviously, as you know, I moved to Slovenia, Croatia. Most of my fishing was out there. I lived like a mile away from Lake Bled, and everybody knows Lake Bled from the Nash videos back in the day. So that Eurobanks, I mean, that was the reason why I moved to Slovenia. So I was fishing up at Church Lake. In fact, I was on the Cops, and Ollie and Alan had just got back from that very first filming trip, the Eurobanks, and Ollie's like, Jay, you got to check this out, look at it. And he showed me all the footage off the back of the camera. I just bought a camper van, my first ever camper van. I had a black VW T5, and I was looking for somewhere to go for the summer. This was like spring, back end, I think it was springtime they went, didn't they? And he showed me all this footage off the back and this church on an island in the middle of the lake. I was just like, I rang the missus and I went, that's where we're going. We're going to Slovenia. And it worked out pretty well because we already had tickets for this festival in Croatia. I think it was Defected Festivals or Sunsea Beach, one of them. And I was just like, right, here's what we do. We go to Lake Bled, we go fishing, and a couple of our friends who do the Northern Angling Show with Spenny and Reedy, they were up for it as well on that first trip, and that was it. It was a big team of us with girlfriends, and that ended up in the campsite on Lake Bled. I blanked.
But you were there.
Yeah, Kevin won't like this, but the key cray killed it. Everybody else caught it, wasn't on the key cray. But to put it in perspective, once I stopped using that bait, I have never had a blank day on Lake Bled since.
Wow, how many times have you been?
4 years. Well, I lived a mile away, and some of the sessions that I did were with one rod for 4 hours, and I still caught. And yet I had a 2-week blank on that first time. They just didn't like that key cray in there.
Wow.
Do you still sell it, by the way? Sorry.
No, not there anymore. We're all right. If anyone's got any, don't use it on Lake Bled. You might see, throughout the course of this, a camera wobble, maybe a bit of sound go,
Lulu.
or a doggy. Give me a lick, Lulu. We've got Lulu, a lot more chilled out. Who have we got there?
That's Gizmo down there.
Gizmo and Lula. Lula loves me. Your doggies, mate, officially carp dogs as well, aren't they? They've been everywhere.
They've been everywhere. They've probably done 10 festivals in Croatia. The festivals over there are very sort of family and dog friendly. And they absolutely love it on the bank. A little pain in the backside at times, aren't you, Lulu dog?
Oh, you're good, Lulu. We'll let you off.
She used to have her own Instagram page, this one. Lulu the
Star of
Carp
Insta.
Pog.
Oh, here we go. Now I feel you should get your own podcast, Lulu. What do you want to say? Anything? There's loads to you, mate. You're probably one of the most multi-dimensional people that I've had on the podcast. There's poker. We've just hinted at all that. There's the Carp Cast stuff with regards to that. There's media. There's fishing. There's also a very unique, I'd say, sort of self-made lifestyle that is all-encompassing of Jamie Clossick. And also, and this is in no way sort of negative, because obviously I've met you, spent a lot of time with you and know things, but on face value, a lot of people have a misconception about you, I think, that I've heard and seen and sort of before I've met you heard about. So there's a lot to talk about within this podcast, and we're going to hopefully encapsulate a lot of those different areas. But I wanted to start with fishing, mate.
Yeah, you missed music out and all that.
DJ.
The biggest thing in my life, I made my entire living has been from making music. You know, I spent 10 years living in a van, touring Europe in like a poppy band through from the age of, I left home at 19 to join a band. Spent the first sort of 7-8 years living in a transit van, touring Europe, and then didn't want to rely on 5 other people to earn a living. The singers would leave and we'd have to replace them. Before digital cameras, you'd have to get a photo shoot, book a studio, set all the equipment up, wait weeks for the repros to come back, get 1,000 copies, and then when the singers would leave, you'd have to do it again, and it was like, I can't do that anymore, relying on other people. It's like, what can I do? That I couldn't sing backing vocals, but I wasn't a good singer, so I couldn't be solo. It's like, what can I do without it? DJ was, in our world, failed musicians became DJs. People who weren't good enough to be a musician ended up becoming a DJ. So it was a bit of a humbling step down. But that's why I ended up in Blackpool, because I took my first job back at the Stage newspaper, which was like the artist sort of paper that you get jobs, work from, all theatre and everything. I mean, one of our singers was Faye from Steps, who got the job in Steps from out of the Stage newspaper, which was the same paper I got the job in Blackpool for. I drove up here in, I was on my arse at the time, drove up here in like a joke car with a bent MOT it's like a clown car where the doors fell off when you opened it. Holes in the floor. I had a guitar, a bag of CDs and a bag of clothes, and I was crapping myself driving up to Blackpool. And 20 odd years later, it worked out all right. But, so yeah, music's probably been the biggest part of my life. I did 250 gigs a year for nearly 30 years. I would say so.
Yeah, that's serious, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, and a lot of the early sort of trips in Europe and that, we'd throw the rods out on the canals on the going from France into Belgium. We used to do a bit of bootlegging back then as well, the tobacco and the cigarette, because I had a van and we used to go to Europe a lot. Like, people would give us money to bring boxes of tobacco back. So 4 or 5 nights a week when I lived in Luton, it was an hour and a half away Dover. So We'd empty the van from a gig at the end of the night. The singers would all get 50 quid each wages, and we'd shoot across, load up with the duty frees on the thingy. It was somebody else's business. They just paid us to do it. Yeah. But yeah, we'd do 5 nights a week. We'd do a gig and then be straight to Belgium afterwards buying tobacco. The good old days. Yeah, but I'd always stick the rods out if I could. It's that canal that the old border is a big one now, but it used to be a really small border between France and Belgium. The canal ran all the way up alongside it, so I used to get just out of reach of the customs, and then sling the rods out, laying in the grass, getting bitten by mosquitoes all night.
Mate, they sound like incredible days, but also an incredible life. Like a feature of it, we've got travel in there with this whole music scene, travel in there with the fishing scene, but also within the realms of you growing up, there was a lot of movement about the place, wasn't there? You weren't sort of, I don't know, grew up in the northwest, fished just the northwest, moved down south. There's a lot of in and out of Bedford and everywhere else, isn't there?
Yeah, so I was born in Bedfordshire, Dunstable, moved to Cheshire when I was fairly young, like before school. I did most of my school in Cheshire, so I learnt to fish the Prince Albert Waters, a place called Worley Mere, which was right near. That was the reason why I started fishing. We moved house from a pretty rough estate in Macclesfield. What was it called? Can't remember. Anyway, we moved to Worley, and there was like a little farmer's pond in the field at the back, and got friendly with the kids in the street. I was only like 9. So yeah, one of the kids in the street, he was like, we're going fishing, do you want to come? I was like, yeah, all right. I'd never been fishing. I ended up catching a perch. I've got the picture somewhere. I've got some mullet haircut and whatever. I might have the picture for you.
This is quality.
And caught this little perch. I was just hooked, and it was just before my birthday. It must have been the kids' holidays in August, and I remember asking my mum for a fishing rod for my birthday, and my dad said something along the lines of, it'll just be a fad, he won't go again. And it literally became my life, for a lot of years. So and then luckily once I'd graduated past kind of fishing, for perch and roach and stuff in this pond, there was this bigger lake, walking distance from the house. It's sort of 12 minutes, which is quite important as a kid, when you got no transport. And used to fish for these crucians in there in Worley, and then just before it went dark every night, the float would go under and bang, snapped off, and started using 5-pound line straight through, and you'd still get snapped off just on dark. I was like, I want to catch whatever these fish are. I want to catch it. So up the tackle, ended up landing one. On floaters, actually, these brekkies, they were called cat biscuits. I think they're called munchies now. They're like little kind of clover-shaped things, and used to free line them. I'd just soak them in boiling water, put a bit of food colouring in it, in like a Tupperware box, put the lid on. They go quite rubbery, and you could thread them up the line, which gave you weight. So I'd have like 6 of them on, fling it over the pad, sort of 10, 15 yards, and then bump. I remember catching this fish. I wasn't allowed, because I was still quite young, it's probably 10 or 11 at this point. And
that is young, isn't it?
Yeah, and I wasn't allowed to night fish. But I used to sneak out of the house. I'd creep out of the house like when it was still dark, like 2, 3 in the morning, as early as I could. Make sure I got there and mum and dad are in bed. And I remember catching this very first. It was the first one of these big fish that I'd caught. It's probably about 6, 7 pound at the time. And I remember it was just getting light as I done it, because you could hear him slurping under the pads and everything. Flicked it over the pads, landed this fish, got one of them little kind of round landing nets. I've left it in the side. I ran all the way home. It's like 15-minute walk or something like that. I ran all the way home to wake my dad up, forgetting that I'm not supposed to be there. And I'm like, Dad, I've caught this fish. And it's like, what do you mean? You caught this fish? You're supposed to be in bed.
He lose his head, wasn't he? Was he all right?
He was all right, yeah, but I was so excited. I just had to run home to tell him. And then, I ended up becoming a carp fisherman. You end up getting 2 rods and all the matching alarms and rods and all that. Sundridge £10 in money rods were my first ever carp rods. And so then I was lived in Cheshire till I was 15, and my dad was like a social worker, so I used to go around different counties and stuff, and we ended up going to the Cotswolds, which was another good stage in my fishing career, because it was about a 30-40 minute drive from Horseshoe. This is like before the Carp Society had it. And a guy that I got friendly with, we used to go all over the place fishing. He was a bit older than me, so he had a driving licence. I was still 15 at the time, and we used to fish Horseshoe, and obviously that was prolific in them days. It hadn't done a 20 pounder at the time. The year I moved away from there, it did its first 20 pounder. And then it did 3, you know, like just before the close season, 15th of March. We fished that week just before it did 320s that week. It had never done a 20 before. And then I left home to join a band. I think I was 18, 19. Yeah, so somebody from Luton, my uncle, all my sort of mum's brothers were in the music industry.
Oh, okay, there's that influence, all right.
Yeah, so my Uncle P gave me my first guitar, a Gretsch it was, which is actually quite a famous guitar. The Beatles used to use them and whatever. It was like, you know, very high-end guitar for a kid. And the drummer in his band Mick, R.I.P. Mick, they were quite famous in the 60s and stuff. They were, he played the Isle of Wight Festival with Jimi Hendrix and all sorts. He was signed to Telstar. Used to all the one-hit wonder band. So I used to go down and deck with them. Like every school holiday, I'd get on a coach, go down there, get up on stage, play. I could play every 60s song there was with him within the first cycle of 12 bars. Like I knew the song, if you know what I mean, just busking as I went. So I do that every school holiday. Anyway, the drummer in my uncle's band went to rehab and they got in a session drummer at the time. He used to play with the brand new Heavies, Kev he was called. And I was never forget the day, I was 19, phone rang one day, my mum went, "Oh, it's for you." I was like, "Who is it?" "It's Kev." I was like, he was like my hero, you know, he was like a younger guy, he was into raving. This is in the early 90s, probably 1990, 91. And he asked me to join a band. He's putting an original band together. I was blown away. Like this guy was like, looked up to him, you know. And so that was it. I packed my case again and off I went down south back to Luton. So obviously when I lived down there, I started fishing again. And it was right on the edge of the Colne Valley, Watford. So I ended up getting a Boyer Leisure ticket. It was like a coverall ticket. It covered everywhere except for Harefield. So I forget all the lakes. There was absolutely loads of them, but the one I fell in love with was Rodney Meadow. Really liked it. It had a 30 pounder in it. It had 2, in fact. I'd never caught a 30 at the time. Actually, before Rodney Meadow, there's another one in Bedfordshire I used to fish. Oh, what's that called now? Martin Clark. It was like where he caught his first 30 from. There's a fish called Scaly in there, which I ended up having. I caught my first 20 and my first 30 in the same session.
Joking.
I got a 20. So the 2 biggest fish in the lake, a 27 and a 31. The biggest fish was called Scaly. I probably got pictures of them with a very dodgy mullet haircut again.
I love this mullet, mate.
Good. So yeah, and then I got the Boyer Leisure ticket after that. Yeah, I did a couple. I didn't want to fish for 40s. I actually got offered a Harefield ticket. I put my name down when I got the Boyer Leisure ticket, and that was in the days when they were all on there, Malins and Briggsy and all them. And I was like, I don't want to catch a 40 pounder when I've only caught like one scrape at 30. It was I was of that era where you kind of had to go through the ranks. I didn't want to catch a 30 before I'd catch a 20, and you know, kind of going up that way. And it would have been nice to have fished on there in that era, but I knew it was all long range, and I was a young kid with not much money, so I wouldn't have been able to upgrade the rods and all that. So it was kind of a natural progression for me fishing. You know, now you can go and take a ticket on Brazen O's on a day ticket and catch a 40 pounder on your first session. You know, it's kind of different. For me, it was special. I wanted that natural progression, I think.
But there was also this element, and it's a growing element, we're going to come to a few chapters, where for you there is some sort of an intent or target. Now, whether that is a fish, and it's generally a big fish, but there's normally something in there for you to sort of angle towards, isn't there? It's not just going fishing numbers. It's not really that of an interest, is it? There is that single focus. It
is quite astute of you, yeah. I only learned this about me in the last few years, but I'm lost without a target. I need a target. So I like this. I've actually learned it's the journey for me. You know, one of the most unhappiest times I've ever been in my life was when I was living in Slovenia. I'd split with my girlfriend. My first dog had died. He was called Louis. That's why she's called Lulu, because it was a male. It's a rescue dog. He died. I split with my girlfriend. My uncle, who's was responsible for my music career, he died. This is all in the space of a few weeks.
Yeah, heavy.
And I'm living in another country on my own, no support network or whatever. And I had a really bad time. I actually fell out with Kevin in that same little window. You know, Kevin, we can move on to that later, because a lot of people ask me why you're not with Nash anymore.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely nothing to do with fishing or business or anything. I was just like, right, you've crossed the line. It's in a very, very sort of low part of my life at the time. Then I actually forgot what led me down this little
the target,
road.
Mate. The target focus.
The target. So I was actually the most financially stable I'd ever been. Then, like, I had 3 businesses which were all kind of passive income. I had the holiday company. Lulu, come on. I had the holiday company running trips to Bled and Bear Lake over there. I had the fishing show which Reedy was running. So I literally turned up, you know, a week before it happened.
Don't tell him that. Say you did all the hard work, mate.
I have to do it now. He went back to Nash.
Oh, no, he did. Of course he did.
But, you know, that was kind of a passive income. The holiday company was passive income. And then I had all the music stuff, the gigs and everything. So none of it felt like work. It meant I had a lot of time to travel the world and do whatever. But I was financially the most stable I'd ever been. Yet I wasn't fighting for anything. I wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
I didn't have a target. I'd kind of beaten the game that you think you're trying to do in life, where you're trying to get comfortable. And yet I was so unhappy. You know, I could have met a girl who lived in Indonesia and moved there if I wanted. You know, I was comfortable, yet I was super unhappy. And I actually learned that it's the journey, it's that fighting, it's that being hungry, it's that trying to get a new thing going, or trying to start a new business, or trying to catch the biggest fish in a lake, or that journey is it. I realised it is the journey that motivated me. It's, you know, it's not the rewards. It's, you know, I've had that many failed businesses. I'm one of them people that gets ideas, think, oh, I'll have a go at this. I've always wanted a bar. I'll buy my own bar. Probably a really bad decision, the bar in the wrong place or the wrong time or whatever, but something that I just wanted to do. It's that hunger of doing it, you know, whether it works or whether it doesn't work. So some people say to me, I'd go on a runs water on a lake that's, you know, the biggest fish in there is 18 pounds or 20 pounds, like foxes up at Wyreside or somewhere like that. I'd have to have a little competition with my mates, right? Let's put a fiver and see who catches the most. That would be my target, to try and catch more than everyone else. It didn't matter that they were 10 pounders. I needed that goal to get motivated to go to the lake. If one of my friends says, oh, let's just go to this lake for a bit of fun, I'm not interested. I'm like, oh, it hasn't got any big fish in there. I don't care if I'm going to catch the big fish. I need to know there's one swimming about that I wouldn't mind catching. Yeah. It gives me the purpose to actually fish the lake. Or if we set a little target, you know, who's going to catch the most fish, or let's try and all catch a fish not on a conventional bait. So we can go in the supermarket, you know, you can use toothpaste, you can use anything you can buy in the supermarket that's not a fishing bait. Just a goal, like to set something. But I've only learned that in the last few years about myself, but yet it's been a massive factor my entire life.
That's interesting, isn't it? What a mindset. Yeah, you need that to sort of, I don't know, get up for it, feel the buzz. I completely understand that with the amount of carp fishing you've done, but even back then it seems that not only did you sort of have a target or take on real big challenges, and we're going to talk about Elstow coming into it, but you also were a doer, mate, weren't you? You're not somebody who just sits there and thinks about it. You've referenced loads of different chapters here where you've forged, which on paper nowadays is the ultimate, to have that freedom to earn money, have enough money about you to go and do exactly what it is what you want, but then the presence of mind to realise that you've got that freedom, and it's not necessarily that freedom that is the thing that you're chasing, is it? You need a goal, you need something to work towards. Yeah,
I've always been unemployable. I've never really been able to work for somebody else. I've always had to do my own thing, but I've also not been very sensible. You know, for all the highs that I've had, the lows have been really low. You know, I've kind of been aware of this for years, but some people need structure, they need rigidity, they don't want to worry about, you know, I've known people that are brilliant at stuff, and they could make tons of money having their own company, yet they're happy to go to work at 9 a.m, finish at 5, not have any stress, any worry, you know, take the few holidays a year, have a stable life, missus and kids. But I think that sort of person, their highs are there, their lows are there, their highs are there, their lows are there. You know, my highs are up here, but the lows, you know, equal out just the same. And, you know, I've been in some very dark places in my life. You can't have that level of freedom and hedonism without making sacrifices, you know, and you know when I was so obsessed, like fishing Elstow, I drove there to bait up once. You know, it's a 3-hour drive each way, 200 and something miles from Blackpool. I drove there to bait up because I couldn't fish that week. You know, I did it in Shropshire as well when I was fishing the Colmere for the Banana Common. Same thing. Just go up there, you know, and sometimes that meant not being able to pay the mortgage. Like Jeez. I was that obsessed, I would do it. A little bit more sensible now, but you know, I haven't been as sensible. You know, I've been paid well over £1 million to DJ. You know, during the last 20-25 years. You know, I've probably earned similar amount of money at poker. I would say over the years. I don't really own anything. You know, I haven't prepared for retirement. I've just had a really nice life for a lot of times, but the downsides of that, you know, there are sacrifices that you make from relationships to missing family stuff to, you know, being obsessive about certain things. It's got sacrifices. It annoys me when you see, you know, certainly on social media, you see somebody do really well, a Terry Earn or a Darryl or whoever it is, and it's like, oh, well, they get free bait or they're full-time, they get all the time in the world. And it's like, you know, people are quite bitter and jealous of that, and it's like, hang on a minute, you can't have all that success without giving up something else. You know, if you know, all credit to you, you're not prepared to miss the family meals and the celebrations just because the weather's really good. You know, Terry Earn would have been out on that weather regardless of whatever. If he knew that fish was getting caught that week, he was in tune with the lake. He's going to sacrifice everything to be there in that right time, and you can't have the glory without you know, without the downside of it, you know, and there are a lot of downsides to making certain choices in life. So it does annoy me a bit. And not to mention, you don't get free bait until you've already proved yourself.
Yeah, you've got to do a fair bit before you get some free bait. I was going to say, we're going to talk about that whole aspect, but like you say, a lot of the emphasis that people see is the sort of highlights. They don't see everything that is the lows behind it or what is being given up or passed over to make that highlight happen. For you, we're going to start, I think, with regards to Elstow, because Elstow is, I mean, it's infamous, it's iconic, it is all that. Pit 2 fish, mate, like a ridiculous water. Put into context the sort of scale of angling with regards to your campaign on there and the stuff that you'd done preceding that. It's a different level, isn't it, mate?
It nearly broke me, I'm not going to lie. So there's a few lakes that nearly broke me, but yeah, but when I went on there, I'd been fishing Wyreside, which was a big step up in lakes. I'd met a couple of the Manchester lads on there, and they'd just got tickets on Elstow 2. So Elstow 2 at the time, it was very inhospitable. It was barren. It was all clay. You couldn't get a barrow around it, so it was all carrying your gear. And you know, it was 35 acres. And if it was wet, like you had lead boots on, you know, you couldn't even lift your feet up with the weight of all the lead stuff. You know, the clay on it. There was red ants. Just everything about it was against you. And it was about 35 acres, and it had I think 17 or 19 fish in it, something like that. But 240s, so the 40 that had been there for a couple of years, you know, a lot of name anglers had a go, was called the Mother. And during the time that we'd planned to go on there, there's another one come through, the Twin. So people were joining lakes, you know, the top anglers were joining lakes for 140 at the time. You know, it's equivalent, probably the equivalent of a 60 in a lake now.
What year are we talking here, mate?
It's at least 20 years ago, I would have said.
Early 2000s you're talking, or
yeah,
90s?
Yeah, no, early 2000s. Yeah, I don't know, 2002 maybe.
Yeah.
But the beauty of them sort of lakes, them low stock ones, were they didn't have many anglers on them. There was a bit of a camaraderie, you know. You had half a dozen guys that might fish the weekends, maybe 3 or 4 that had fished the midweek. I was gigging Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think I had a residency in Preston at the time. So yeah, I was gigging in Preston at the time, like 4 nights a week. So I had this routine. I had my car that I would go to work in. Then on the Sunday night, I had this old battered Escort Security Corps van that all my fishing gear lived in. So I'd go to work in that on the Sunday night. Hopefully, didn't meet any women that wanted to live home. And then I'd drive. As soon as I finished work, whatever time it was, 2 a.m., I'd drive down south, get there at first light, knackered, because I'd normally not slept all weekend as well, because I'd been working on partying all weekend.
But also there must be some adrenaline come down, mate, as well, that would hit you.
Without a doubt, but it was a good life balance, because, I was partying all weekend, and then, first light on a Monday morning, I was arriving on a lake. I met Mark Watson, other host of the Carp Cast. I met him on there, and we got in a routine. He used to arrive on a Monday morning as well. He had a warehouse job, and we'd have a Stella 6 a.m. on a Monday morning when we arrived. It was quite nice, like that pit too. That was what really got me into that sort of big fish fishing, because it wasn't just, you were all hunting a target. The elements and the fish were normally against you, but you were all in the same mindset. You were sharing information to some degree, but I think it's, like in times of hardship or people come together, don't they? And I think when you fish in a lake like that, where everything's against you and catching's out of the ordinary, you end up developing that same sort of thing. Like, it's us against the fish, not us against each other. There's a little bit of that. So yeah, I met Paul Harris on there. He used to fish one night a week. We used to have a Tuesday night barbecue with him. It was nice times, and it got me addicted to that sort of style of angling. And then I remember chatting at one of the Tuesday night barbecues with Paul and Mark. I was on 20 something nights blank, which was unheard of. I always caught more than everyone else everywhere I've been, even from being a kid. Like, I just had this, I could always catch more, because I was one of them annoying kids that would go around the lake and speak to everybody and go, and have you caught anything? I'd want to know the information. I want to know why, what was going on. Right, him over there, he's fishing in this sunken riverbed and he's fishing 50 yards, so I know if I ever get in that swim, I've got to do this, I'd catch more. But the lad that I told you about that used to drive me to Horseshoe, Glyn, he was the opposite, right? So he'd put a rod where I would never put it, and I'd be like, no, you've got to be fishing here. It's like, I've spoke to everybody, I know where you've got to fish. I'd catch 6, he'd catch 1, but his was the biggest fish in the lake. And it taught me that big fish don't do what the other fish do. Anyway, that was kind of my transition into catching more than everybody else, into working out why the big fish, certain people always catch the big fish. And it's because they're normally not doing what the other fish are doing. The big fish act differently, I think. And
you think that's consistent everywhere? Like
100%. 100%. Yeah. You might know this lake, Zajaki in Croatia. There's quite a few people doing trips there now, late bookings. All the sort of prolific anglers, your Tom Makers and stuff, have been going over there for a bit now. Everybody you speak to, the local, they'll tell you the biggest fish came from not where everyone else catches them. So it's known as a long range, heavy bait water. Yep. You've got to fish as far as you can and spod, literally 12 hours a day. Everybody will tell you the biggest fish came 30 yards out, in a long range swim. And it's the bigger fish aren't daft. I think they're just more experienced. I don't think they're any more clever. I just think they've been acclimatized a lot longer. Your bigger fish are generally older, and I think they've learned that the spod spill lands 30 yards out and nobody ever fishes there, so that it's free food. Or you'll catch him doing something different. You'll be fishing mid water or popped up off the lead, or it's a very common story. I mean, Wyre Lake, obviously, from Wyre side, it's fishing there called paw print. Might be dead now, I'm not sure, but
paw print's gone.
So we used to call that the fish of nods, right? So none of the regulars you caught it. The people that were gored that used to catch every time they go, a day ticket angler, first time on the lake, he'd go in a long range swim where you've got to fish the roadie bush, or you've got to fish there, or you've got to fish there. He didn't know, and he'd fish 30 yards out. If he had a bite, it'd be paw print. It happens so often.
It's true though. I've seen it. Dave at Bluebell Swan, the same thing. Just go off a bag that's chucked randomly into sort of not on a spot.
Yeah. So big fish definitely act differently. I've had this conversation with a lot of big fish anglers, and it's a different mindset. So I caught Angry out the Manchester Park Lake doing exactly the same thing. So the first season I fished it properly, I think the top rod had 15 fish, and I had 15 fish. On the lake, lake that had, I can't remember how many fish it had, but wasn't many, 30 or something at the most. Anyway, on my last session on there in the autumn, when I pulled off, I had 6 fish in the session, which is a lot for there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a lot at the time with all the originals in there. Anyway, there was a guy called Robbo, or Fireman Sam, they used to call him. He was going to Cassine on the Friday. Anyway, he come down to see me one morning. He was working nights as a fireman. He came down to see me, and I was like, "You fishing?" He went, "No, I'm going to Cassin on Friday." I went, why don't you just fish the days then and leave your gear with me? I'll look after it in the day and work your nights and pop on in the mornings. He went, "Oh, go on then, yeah, if you don't mind, I'll do that." Anyway, I was having it right off. I was catching fish every day.
How were you catching them?
And
how were you catching them? Yeah,
regular spotting. It was the regular feeding that did it. I'm absolutely convinced. I was only regular feeding because I was getting levered on a pretty blatant spot in the middle. I was getting hammered by ducks.
Bird life, yeah.
Yeah, so I kept spotting to keep the ducks off the spot. Anyway, I just spotted on the spot, and then it was, because the ducks were on it, it went blip, 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 like this, definitely, and then a duck popped up. It definitely picked it up. And as the duck hit the surface, it ripped off. There was a fish on it. So the duck must have picked the rig up, dropped it, and the carp's grabbed it straight away as if it's created the competition. Anyway, it happened 3 times off that spot. I think I had four and lost one off that spot, and two off a shorter spot. But it was always straight after spotting, and twice it happened where a duck had picked it up and then it went straight away with the thing. It happened to me on Nash Church Lake one time as well. Same thing with the ducks, but it was when they'd brought out those, remember the first throwing sticks they did where you loaded them at the bottom? I forget.
Yes, I know what you mean.
Forget what they were called
the
now.
Old Slingshot style ones or whatever. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so they gave me a prototype. I was up there fishing, and they gave me a prototype to test out. So I was testing it, but what that meant was I was randomly putting boilies in constantly, like all day. Anyway, again, I had 8 or 10 bites off the spot in the middle between the 2 islands. Nothing happened for 2 days, but I kept whacking boilies out there with this stick to test the stick out, and then all of a sudden it just kicked, and I'm sure it was the continuous feeding. A bit like when you're float fishing, you'd never cast a float out without putting a handful of maggots around it, and if it goes stale, you put another handful and another handful, and eventually it pulls the fish in. I'm convinced that works with fish. I've got a load of stories like that, but Jim Shelley's was the master at that method, fishing in the early days of the chards. He was fishing the chard and just using a throwing stick, putting single boilies around it constantly, just plopping them in. Dave Levy, back in the day when he fished Sutton, he was doing the same thing with the hemp, just catapults of hemp, bang, bang. Tons of examples of it, and it's exactly how the Croatia fish is. It's just that constant feeding, just like you would with maggots over a float. I think it makes a difference. I fish like that everywhere now. I'm quite happy spotting on bite time. You get people that moan at you on certain lakes, but the amount of fish I've had now while spotting, it's unreal, because it's free food for them. They know spotting's so common on lakes that they're not scared of it. They know it's free food.
Even the big ones, you think? That noise isn't an issue?
The big ones sit underneath and take the spots. Yeah. I've seen it happen. That bear lake we were talking about in Slovenia, I've seen the fish jump out and try and grab the spot as you're spotting. I mean, that's heavily stocked, that lake, so it's more extreme. But I think the same thing's happening even on lower stock lakes.
It's interesting what you said about the Park Lake there, because like that's a low stock venue. The regular feeding, you'd think on that low stock type of venue, the more commotion you're making with regards to that spom, the less likely you are for those fish to get on you. But if in practice there, that's unbelievable. 6 fish.
The spom's not dangerous. Fish are not clever. They learn by experience from danger. So even if they believe there's a hook bait underneath the spom, they know that all that food mid-water is completely free food, and I think the bigger fish definitely understand that. So Croatia, Slovenia, it's very common that the locals over there, I mean, they only use 2 rods and they'll fish one popped up off the lead. So a lot of the lakes have got a 50 centimetre hook link rule. Because you're not allowed to use zigs and stuff because they're quite deep. It can be dangerous using really sort of long zigs. So they have, but anyway, the amount of times where you're catching a lot of fish but you've had no big ones, one of the locals will say to me, pop one up off the lead, 50 centimetres anyway, your biggest fish of the session's off that thing. But while you're spotting, so the big fish were there all the time. They just were a bit wary of taking off the bottom, which means they were taking the free food out the spot. I've got I'll see if I can dig it out and give it to you. So nobody's ever seen this in public, but I think there was one of my pals at the time was over with me on Bear Lake. He was over from England, and he was big into his zigs. And I was telling him that we'd pour 5 kilo of bait in out the boat, and I was pretty sure none of it was getting to the bottom. Anyway, it was in the early days of the deepers. So I had one of these deepers. So I went out in the boat. How did we do it now? Anyway, long and short of it was, I had the deeper out there. I poured 5 kilo of bait, and you could see the fish come up to the bait, and it filled the screen. The screen was just full of fish, so you could see the bait going through the water. None of it hit the bottom. 5 kilos, not one bit of it.
Snuffle.
But at one point, the screen was just full of fish. Like, you couldn't. There was not a single bit of black in the screen. It was just all fish. So I think that happens to some extent on all lakes. So take a lake like Grenville. You know, I've watched people tip 20 to 30 kilos out in the boat. Will pull or go out in the boat and tip the bait for you, and you've got a bite within half an hour after it's been static for 24 hours.
Yeah,
like it's the bait that that encourages them. So I think in regards to spotting, it's a dinner bell. That noise is not scaring them. It's the opposite. They know it's safe underneath the spawn. They know it's free food. Yeah, the smarter fish might realise that, yeah, we don't want to feed in the bottom. There's a good chance there's danger down there. But I think, again, fish are just creatures like animals. You know, I can goad my dog. He's all lazy there now. He's just sat there. If he doesn't want to play, I know how to push his buttons to get him hyper, right? So I think with the fish, even if they know there's danger down at the bottom, that repeated baiting, that curiosity, eventually they'll go, I'm going to have a go. Yeah. And then you catch one off the bottom. But I think in the meantime, they definitely know it's safe higher up, you know. And you see the Tom Makers and people like that, they fish that style on the well-stocked waters, you know, on the linears and stuff. But it works on the low stock waters as well.
That's interesting. That. And did you have angry, as you said, off load that same area?
So I actually caught it from a different swim, but yeah, to finish that story off, so Fireman Sam was coming down every morning. I was having it right off. I had 6 of the originals, and I think I lost 1 or 2. Anyway, on the Thursday morning, which was going to be his last morning because he was going to France on the Friday, it was carpy as hell. It was really heavy rain, so he's come down, got his gear. I've stayed in the bivvy rather than chatting with him like I normally would. And I remember just looking out the bivvy and seeing him playing a fish, and I knew he was angry. I don't know why, I just knew it was going to be angry. Anyway, he caught it in the next swim to me, and I was having it off. I was having all the originals, and yet he's caught angry in the next swim. It was crapping out my bait, so I had been eating the bait. But the important thing is it got caught a swim away. Anyway, after speaking to quite a few other people, this was actually quite common. It was always near the other fish, but it never got caught with them. It was quite often a lone bite. And I remember I stopped fishing that year. I didn't end up going back for a couple of seasons. But I remember learning that lesson, thinking, right, when I go back on there, I'm not going to fish where the fish are. I'm going to fish near him. And that's how I ended up catching it. So it was due. It was the spring a few years later. I think I'd had a couple of fish, but I'd gone down there. I knew I was going to be on for a good session, 4 days or something. And I was really keen. It was due, and there was quite a few lads on there. Anyway, it ended up actually showing with the rest of the fish, a couple of swims to the right of me. And just as I'd seen them, somebody else had seen them, and they beat me to it. They'd moved. And anyway, they've got their rods out. And the fish, you could name them, the top 3, the 3 biggest fish, all the 30s and angry. You could see them popping their heads up one after the other over his spot. I went to bed feeling sick, going, it's 100% going to catch it. Woke up in the morning, walked up there, and what you had then? One of them, and he went, they've gone. I was like, yes. I was like, yes, right, where are they? Anyway, and another lad, George, he come down. There was a lot of people on the lake. I think Roger Bacon was walking around at the time, like his grandchildren. It just seemed that everybody I knew was on there at the time, either fishing or walking around. It was nice in the video. I won't spoiler it just now. So George has said all the fish are in this bottom bay. There's like a climbing tree in the corner. Everybody went on this climbing tree as they went round in the bay. He went, Jay, all the fish are down here. And I was like, right, okay, I'm going the other side of the lake then. He went, what? I was like, if the fish are there, I want to be over here. I don't, I didn't explain myself at the time. Anyway, so I've set up in a swim called the Monument on the other side from where they were, thinking this is near enough. If the bulk of the fish are down there, then I want to be here. Anyway, I've set up in this swim. It was actually the swim that I'd started in before the fish turned up to the right, where the other lad had them showing over him. So I've moved from that swim, fished 2 more swims, and then moved back to it, just because it was near the other fish. So as I'm setting up, I seen a little fish, like 20-pounder, sort of stick its head up 30 yards out just to my left. I was like, oh, that's a good sign, you know. Bearing in mind, most of the fish are on the other side of the lake. So I put a little light lead, and it was really weedy on there. So I put like a 1 ounce lead, flicked it to where the fish showed, and it went crack. So if you get any bump with a 1 ounce lead, you know it's clean. And I was like, perfect, that's my first spot. So I rigged the rod up, flicked it there. Because that's such a good spot, I thought, right, I'll leave the other rods like away. So I'm having a little lead around to the right, trying to find a spot. As I'm doing that, I looked back to this first spot, and it was angry. You can't mistake it. It's chocolate brown, its head, and it just this big chocolate brown fish just went like this right on the same spot where I've just put that rod. I was like, that's a big fish, but didn't kind of tell myself it was angry, even though I knew it's the only fish that size, and it's chocolate brown. It just looks brown. And I was like, that's a good fish on my spot. Carried on. I got the second rod out. I'm just rigging up the third rod, and it's ripped. And so Roger's brother-in-law, Chalk, he was walking round. Roger's son-in-law, their kids. A few of the other locals on the lake, you can actually hear on the video. So it's all captured on video. This you can actually hear on the video. Somebody who was on the other side opposite me going, that's angry, that, because it's hit the surface straight after I've hooked it, and apparently angry always does that, which I didn't actually know that, but the fat lady used to do that as well. As soon as you hooked it, it'd hit the surface. And yeah, anyway, landed it all on video, and it was angry. But that was all from that lesson from 2 years ago, knowing that you didn't want to fish where the fish were. It wouldn't be too far away, but it wouldn't be where they were. And again, the only bite that I had, you know.
Yeah, that is especially when you've had that much of the stock as well. That's that's a trend that's pretty easy to follow, isn't it? Away from them all, like you say. And it is some fish. I don't necessarily think it's the best looking fish, but in that area on that, like, it's a mega test, isn't it? It's not an easy fish to catch.
It's probably one of my best ever captures. I've caught bigger fish, you know. I've had multiple county records, you know, in different counties, Cheshire, Cambridgeshire. That was the Lancashire record at the time, apart from the Pendle fish, which is another conversation. But it's didn't come from Lancashire and don't live in Lancashire now. You know?
The tourist,
different conversation. But it was one of my favourite captures. You know, I earned it. You know, I had a game plan, and it just means a lot in the northwest, that fish, you know.
100%. What was it? What was park life like, mate? Did you enjoy that? It's as you said, there's people that you know on there, but there's also, it's massively open to the public and a bit of a circus at times.
I had no problems at all. A lot of the rumours about it being unsafe weren't really true. You know, the stories of cars getting burnt out was an insurance job, you know, done by the person who owned the car or one of his mates. It's got that reputation, but yeah, it's fine. There's a couple of times on there where, you know, you got the weekenders sort of staying up all night, levered locals, and I thought I wouldn't want to be around that side, you know. Some intimidating characters, you know, not out and out carp anglers, you know, but people that went carp fishing, you know, notorious. So this is a couple of things like that where I thought, I wouldn't really want to be over there. The toughest bit on there was, there was quite a few very, very good local anglers fishing it regular, and the reason why I pulled off the season before, didn't fish it for a couple of years, was I'd turn up there on a Monday morning and I'd be the only person on the lake, and the top 6 swims were all being pre-baited by some of these good locals, and it was like, well, I can't go in there because if I end up catching the fish, it's going to ruin the capture. Someone's going to say, oh, he caught it off so-and-so's baiting, or he caught it off so-and-so's spot, and it wasn't fishing. You know, even though I had every right to go in any swim that I wanted to, there's nobody on the lake. It would have been poo-pooed if, you know, people, that story about Fireman Sam that I told you about, people were saying, oh, he caught it off Clossick's spot, and it was, you know, I was taking the picture of the fish and somebody's wrong me saying he's dropped it, and he's dropped it. I was like, no, I'm taking the picture of it now. Of course he hasn't dropped it. People like knocking other people's success. And so the last thing I wanted to do was, in that environment, you know, not be able to fish where I wanted to fish, without the thought of, even if I catch the big one, people are going to like put it down, saying that I did it off someone else's bait or whatever. So that side of it, with it being a very cheap ticket in a public lake, that side of it wasn't enjoyable. But so I just didn't fish there that year and came back another year, you know.
And got it done, mate. It's in the album.
Got it done, yeah. It's definitely one of my best ever captures. Like I said, I've had a few special ones, but
you've had a few, mate. Yeah.
But catching a 40 from me, you know, the county that I lived, Lancashire, was second home to me. You know, it's still the place I've spent most of my life. You know, it you know, did mean a lot. And like I say, it's a special fish. I think the time I'd caught it, you know, it was 20 odd years old, that fish. I mean, it's probably 40 years old now, but it's probably 25 to 30 years old. I think it only had like 10 noted captures at the time. Like it was an every few year fish. It wasn't an every year fish. That's come out a bit more regularly in the last few years. You know, I think it came out 5 times one year, but you know, when I caught it, it was once every 2 years, once, you know, sometimes longer. So it was a really nice target. Again, going back to that journey, like it was it meant a lot because there was a journey to catch it and a little bit of strategy and something to work out, you know, and that's what makes me tick, I think.
Back to Elstow, mate. You pretty much on there, you had a nice scene with regards to the other people fishing the lake, but approaching that lake, again, we talked about this target element and trying to catch sort of the twin, the mother, those two. Did you have any starting points, or what was the sort of theory behind how you were going to actually get it done?
So I'd done 20 odd blank nights. I was, before we went off at a tangent.
I like that tangent. It's a good one.
I remember one of these barbecues chatting with Paul and Mark, and I was just like, I can't imagine where my first bite's going to come from. I don't feel like I've learned a single thing. I don't think I've got any chance of catching a fish out of this lake. Anyway, one of the things we learned is when you did see them, they did show quite a bit for you know, a very low stock lake, but if you moved on them, they would move. Before you got the first rod out, they were gone. So if you saw them showing, the first thing that worked out was you need to beat the fish to wherever they're going to be. And the only clue you've got for that is wind. So try and get ahead of the fish on a new wind. Anyway, once I'd kind of realised this, because I thought you've got to have baits in position before the fish come. That's the only way I'm going to catch a fish. So I've told this story before, so I'll do it quite quickly. But it worked out that I was waiting for this window. There was a window late spring. There hadn't been a bite for ages. The lake hadn't done a bite for a month. It was all high pressure. Fish were showing in the middle. You know, where they show 20 times in a row, 10 yards apart, and they're just not feeding. They're not going near the bottom. Anyway, there was a change in the weather. We had a big southwesterly come in, and the wind was coming on the Monday, and I used to drive down Sunday night, as I told you, start fishing on the Monday morning, and I was like, that's not early enough. I'm going to take the Sunday off work, so I sacrificed a night's work on the Sunday. Again, what we spoke about, making sacrifices for your fishing. Probably couldn't afford to do whatever I needed to do that week. You know, lost 25% of my wages that week. But I was like, I've got to get there on the Sunday. Anyway, so I've took the Sunday night off. I've got down there Sunday lunchtime. It's peeing it down with rain. And the wind's still easterly. It's blowing the other way, but I know it's changing to a southwesterly tomorrow. And somebody was actually in the Carp Park corner swim. He'd caught the twin. He was the only one on the lake, and he was. I didn't really get on with this guy, and he was a bit bitter. He was like, "Oh, I suppose you want to go in here then?" And I was like, "No, I'm going around the other side." And I seen him go, like, "You must be fucking mad." But I knew the wind was changing, and I wanted to be on this new wind anyway. So rain started easing off a bit. It was the furthest part of the lake from where you could park. Through a farmer's field that was knee deep in bog. And you had to carry the gear 3 trips. So I was absolutely dripping in sweat and knackered. It's now about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's his late spring, like I can't remember, April, May or something. And I'm thinking, great, I'm here a day early anyway, and it's cool. No need to stress. I'm just going to put some food on, make a curry, have a brew, and just like let my body normalise again, dripping in sweat and my heart's racing and whatever. And it's gone flat calm. The rain stopped. It's gone flat calm. I'm like, bugger. It does that when the wind's changing. It's like blows heavy one way, and if it's going to go the other way, quite often it will go calm, and then like pick up when the next weather front comes in. And I remember I was sat under a brolly, my curry was on, and I looked out into the lake and a fish popped its head up. I was like, they're already here. They knew. They knew the weather was changing. I was like, bugger, they're already here. So my plan was to put a bucket of bait out before they got here and then sit on the bait as the wind turns and hopefully the fish would turn up. I was thinking, if the fish are already here, I can't put the bait out because if you set up on the fish, they go. Yeah, so I was like, what am I going to do? I remember ringing my pal and saying, do I put this bait out or what? My plan's been scuppered already. Anyway, I ended up finding the spot, putting the bait out. I had hundreds of casts and I couldn't find a hard drop. If you went deep and past where the onion weed stopped, you could get a bump. But I was trying to find one a little bit closer in, and I'd had 100 casts at least with a light lead and couldn't get a bump anyway. I thought, right, I'll put a long rig on and I'll put a stick on the rig and I'll just put it where I want to put it, and then I'll put the other two in deeper water where I know it's clean. Anyway, just randomly, that rod that I knew was going in weed went crack. I was like, hey, that's not been there. I've had 100 casts in the same area. I was like, I'm not moving that rod. Anyway, 24 hours later, I'd redone the other two rods. I'd left that rod where it is. 5 o'clock the next day, just a one toner from hell. I was scared to pick the rod up. It was just fast but consistent. Anyway, it was the mother. It was the hardest fish in the lake to catch. Again, a once every couple of year fish. PB at the time, 42.10, I think it was, which is big fish for back then. It's probably not far off catching the 60 now, I would say.
That's a massive fish, mate.
Yeah, there was not that many 40s in the country at the time. People like Terry Hearn were joining. He fished there before me to catch that fish. People of his level were joining lakes like that to catch a low 40. It's like, say, equivalent of a 60 now, I would say.
What a bite, mate! I wouldn't want to pick that up, man.
No, it was incredible. Then that was 20 after 23 blank nights, and at some point going, where on earth am I going to catch a fish? I have no idea, but I came up with a strategy, a plan, and it worked. Then back end in the autumn, I'd caught the hardest one out of the two fish. The twin was quite a friendly fish. I was like, wow, no one's ever caught them both in 1 year at 40 pound. 2 40s in a year, and it's game on. I've caught the hard one that comes out every few years. And then I hatched a plan in the autumn. Same thing as another strategy. Mark and I decided pre-baiting was the way. So we picked 12 spots around the lake, and on a Monday and a Thursday, we would bait 6 of them each, and we both knew the spots. There was 2 spots in each area, so if we were both there at the same time, and the wind was going one way, so we picked them on different winds. Same strategy that worked for me on Colmere the year after, actually. I did exactly the same thing, picked 10 spots around the lake on different winds, and not loads of bait, just a kilo twice a week.
Which is boilie?
No, mixed bait. On Colmere, there was hardly any boilie because I thought they were natural feeders, so it was mainly sort of particle, most of it's scoop range, Yeah. I just wanted spots on every wind. Anyway, we did that on Elstow, and back end of the year, it was autumn, same thing, it hadn't done a bite for over a month. It was high pressure, we had a low come in, Mark and I were fishing, I think we had 3 nights each. He'd gone in the swim where that lad, when I caught the mother, where he caught the swim from in the Carp Park corner, Mark had gone in there, which was a known swim for the twin. Like 80% of its captures were from that swim. And I went in the one next door called the Terminator. And the conditions were incredible. And we hadn't seen the fish. We were 2 nights in going,
what's going on?
Yeah, we've got it wrong. Like, what on earth? They must be somewhere else. How can they not be on this wind? And then Mark had a joint PB from the Carp Park corner. I think he ended up having 2 that night, 2, maybe even 3, but definitely 2, which again for a lake with 17 carp in, was quite significant. We were celebrating his PB. We were sat in my swim. We were having a couple of beers, and I had a rod that was literally a rod length out, and it was very deep. Like, it was a rod length out, and it was right by Mark's knee. He's a big old guy anyway. And he was almost touching the rod with his knee, and it went blib, 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 and just a couple of beeps. I was like, you kicked me rod. I thought he had. It wasn't me. It was. Anyway, it wasn't. And then it tightened up, and I hit it, and it was really head knocky, as quite a few big fish are. It's very common, like 40-pound plus fish. Sometimes they feel like tench, and there was quite a few tench in there, and it felt really light, sort of head knocky, and I was like, it's a tench. The rod was hardly bent, and he went, no, it's not. I went, it is, it's a tench. Anyway, it turned out to be the twin, 42 or something.
That's a big old tench, boy.
Yeah, I've had a few like that. I guess we might move on to this, but the big one out of Tatton, that felt the same, felt like a tench.
Never.
Yeah.
I'm not having that.
The barrel, like 54 pound or whatever it was at the time, like a lump of fish, same thing. Just a lot of big fish. I've heard Daryl Peck say exactly the same thing. Like a lot of really big fish, like the fat ones, they head knock. They like shake their head, and it just feels like something tenchy or breamy.
I think we're fishing for different tench, Jamie, mate. You and me, mate. I don't know where you're going. Let's go to that chapter, because I think Northwest, we've talked about Angry, that's iconic. Tatton as a fishing prospect is iconic. I don't actually think those fish get enough credit, especially with sort of southerners. I've talked to various other people that maybe haven't been around it, haven't seen it. But in terms of captures, that place, some incredible fish, but also as an angling sort of, feat. That's to get any form of bite out of there is great angling, top angling.
Yeah, it was physically the hardest thing I'd ever done. So I was aware of the fish. So back in the early days, I don't know if you remember when Gaz Farron was putting the Forgotten Chapters together, sort of in the early days. He spoke to me about he wanted the Colmere fish in the book. I actually said no, because I thought I'd keep it for my own book at some point, maybe. And then he ended up getting Ev's capture of the Banana Common in the book. Anyway, one of the main stories in that book was it Rob Gillespie and Chris Winstanley? They kind of discovered these Tatton fish. I don't know if they discovered, but they're the first ones to really have a campaign and go for it and catch them. Traditionally, there was a couple 100 metres of bank you were allowed to fish, days only, and whatever anybody says, everybody fishes the nights. It was you against the fish. You were climbing over gates, and I nearly lost a finger. I'll show it to the camera in a bit. Another story later on, but so there was all sorts of manoeuvres. It was traditionally done at night. They had a few of these fish. One of the big ones died, and it's just kind of logged in my memory. But so it wasn't until a guy called Rich Seal, I don't know if you know him, he's got quite a famous dad. He used to be like the lawyer for the Carp Society and everybody. His two brothers, they were. Richard, he was on the front page of Carp Talk. He caught the barrel and Jim's fish, braced them. I forget how quick he caught them together, but anyway, one was 40, low 40, and the other was, sorry, Rich, it was either 48 or it was 50. I think it might have been 51 actually, which was a really big fish for the Northwest, and they were both on the front page. And it was only then that I really thought, right, Tatton, it's an hour from home. I've been used to driving 3-4 hours to Yateley and all the Bedfordshire and all the southern lakes. Like, this was going to be heaven. I knew a bit about it from the Forgotten Chapters, and I was like, wow. And I know Rich, he used to come to the Northern Angling Show every year, him, his brother and his dad, his brother's Ben. So I rang him up, I got his number. I can't remember if I rang Crowe at Carp Talk or someone to get his number. Anyway, he was so friendly and pleased to give the information that I needed. I was asking him all the questions. What's the score at night? Is it safe? Can you get in? All the kind of questions that you needed to ask. And decided I was going to have a go. I'd just got a bar at the time, that bad decision I told you about.
As you do, yeah.
that bad decision. Yeah, there was only one bar in Blackpool that was any good that played house music, and I walked past it one day. This is a bit of me. I walked past it one day, and it was shut, and there was a sign in the window saying "to let." 3 weeks later, I opened it.
Mad, mate. Yeah.
I know, yeah. One of the worst financial decisions I ever made, and there's been a few bad ones. But But yeah, it cost me. We had 2 fantastic years, and then it was the year of the smoking ban. It was a feeder bar to the Syndicate nightclub, which was like the biggest nightclub in Europe. Big revolving dance floor, 4 floors. Like, it was massive. Anyway, that's shut down. And there was nothing else up my end of town. And our friends, you know, we'd have a busy Friday and Saturday, but it'd be dead every other night of the week, and you'd lose money on the week with all the costs and everything. So it ended up one of the multiple times in my life it cost me everything I owned. So but good time. Everyone else had a great time. It was it was good. But I couldn't really do much travelling because of the bar, so this worked out quite well. You know, fishing a lake that was an hour away, and you know, doing sneaky nights and stuff. So I got all the information off Rich. There's a couple of other lads that I know, a couple of the Manchester Park Lake lads that I spoke about. A couple of them were on there at the time. I reckon there was probably 6 to 8 people. Including Rob Gillespie, actually. We were speaking about him before. He'd actually gone back on there at the time as well. He was dabbling a little bit. I saw him a couple of nights. But it was physically the most demanding thing I've ever done. So the routine was you got to get there after dark when the gates were shut and there was no more warden. So it's springtime, and that was getting there. You couldn't go on till after 10 o'clock at night. It was starting to get light, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, so you kind of needed to be back then. So I'll never forget the first night. It was awful. I'd actually gone down there with Roger Bacon, put him off for life this first night. It was horrible. I was completely ungeared up for it as well, so there was a lot of walking from where you had to park the car to getting over multiple gates and fences, some very sharp ones with those climb things, the ones with the spikes on, the metal ones with the spike, climbing over those with your gear on your back. So you would super light tackle, obviously no brolly or anything like that. It was just impossible to take any kit. No bed chair, no seat, nothing, because you were carrying it. Anyway, it was between 3 and 5 miles walking there and back.
That's mad.
With your gear on your back and sneaking around. So this first night, got there, I'm really tired. I think I'd done the weekend in the bar, not had much sleep, so I was already knackered. So I'm like this. Anyway, it started raining. I was cold. I didn't have the right clothing. It was horrible. I remember thinking, I can't do this, and had no sleep. Anyway, did it. I could not wait to go. And also, I didn't feel like I was fishing, so I geared one rod up with a chod, and another rod with me sort of normal rig. Anyway, just as you couldn't have any torches or anything like that, so everything had to be already done. And as I've cast out the first rod, I don't know if you remember, but the Nash weed clips were the best clips ever on the market, but they had one batch that were quite brittle, and after you'd had them on for a bit, the lug had snapped when you cast. Anyway, I've done the first cast with his rod, and the thingy snapped, and I can't re-tackle up because you can't use torches or anything like that, because you can't be seen. And I've got no rig on one rod, and I've got this chod rod, and I've had a little lead about, and it's absolutely where we've chose to fish, just completely blind. It's not a small lake either.
It's massive, yeah.
Yeah. And we just randomly turned up, sneaked in, and I just don't feel like I'm fishing. I've got one rod out on a chod that's in the middle of weed, and I'm absolutely wasting my time. And then it started raining. I'm freezing cold. I was shivering, and I was just like, can we go yet? Can we go? Like, could not wait to get off there. So left it to about 2:30, 3. Anyway, we've got home. Now, I'm used to missing sleep. Roger's not. He'd, if we have a night out or a party or whatever, he's wiped out for a week. Anyway, that's what happened. He was like, I was like, the next day I was like, we're going back. And he's like, no, I need a week to recover. He ended up going back one more time later on, and I'll tell that story in a minute. And he's never been back since. But I ended up not being beaten. I thought, right, I need to get down there in the daytime. I need to have a lead around. I don't ever want to be fishing that blind again, Yeah. So I started making time where I could get down there and actually walk around in the daytime, see if I could see the fish, identify some areas, flick a rod out, in under the cover of daylight. I took a little like was it the early days of the scopes? It may well have been But anyway, I took a rod sneaky, left it in the bushes so that I could have a little lead around that, so you'd think that I'd be fishing the next time I went back. Identified a few areas, put some bait in a few different spots just to try and even the odds a little bit from fishing completely blank. You had 4 hours, 5 hours a night to fish, basically, and so I did this for a bit. I ended up getting in quite a nice routine. So I would... my daughter was living with me, and she was in her younger days, so she was at school every morning, and I got in a routine where I'd get home in the morning from fishing the lake. I'd arrive back here about 7 o'clock, just in time for her getting up, get her breakfast, get her school stuff ready, pack lunch, take her to school. Then I'd go to bed. I'd sleep till 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd get up, I'd do all the orders and everything for the bar, any deliveries, all the fruit, stuff for the cocktails, everything we needed. I'd get all that sorted. I'd work the afternoon till 6 or 7 o'clock. I'd have dinner with the missus, see the little one home from school and everything, spend some time with her. And then when they're sat down 9 o'clock at night, ready to go to bed and whatever, I'd shoot off. And it got into quite a manageable routine. So, I wasn't really missing anything in my normal life. I was working in the day. I was, doing the school runs twice a day, having dinner with the family, and then getting to the lake, leaving here at 9, getting to the lake at 10.
How often are you doing this in a week? Every day?
Nearly every night, yeah.
How are you sleeping?
I was sleeping in the day, so I was taking her to school at 8:45 in the morning. Then I got to bed, I'd sleep till 3 and then do the work. Once I got into that routine, it was actually really manageable. So I ended up fishing 9 out of 10 days. Anyway, I decided I was going to fish for a week straight, doing the same thing. No, this week I decided I was going to fish Monday to Friday. We had a big night on at the bar. I think we had a famous DJ coming on the Friday night. Miguel Campbell, I think it was. It was pretty big, hot creations for anyone into their house music and stuff. It was the week Something Special, Sexy Wanna Know, which was like a number 1 track. It was the week that came out. We got him for 200 quid. It was $5,000 the week after.
You timed that well, mate.
Yeah, it was good. We had a few, like the DJs we had in that bar at the time. If you booked them now on a Saturday night, say you had a festival and you booked them all, it'd be £500,000 nearly. We had them all for 200 quid, 250 quid, like just an absolute who's who of famous DJs. Anyway, most of them through Spenny. Spenny hooked a lot of them up. He was booking the acts at Sankey's at the time, so I was like, got anybody that's on the way up sort of thing, and he was quite good at that. A lot of his brand is called Kaluki, and a lot of the acts that played for him, he's very good at getting them on the way up. He used to have Solomon, people like that, like the really, really big DJs that are 50 to 100 grand a gig now. He got them for a few grand back in the day.
What a weird hybrid world of DJ meets carp fishing, mate.
It's very common. The amount of big house DJs that are carp anglers, there's quite a few.
Yeah, I know Al talks about like loads of different sort of I'm not in any way into all that, but yeah, he talks about like fishing. They're featured on videos. You wouldn't think those two worlds marry up, to be fair, but
I think they marry up really well, because I think that kind of music industry and that hedonistic adrenaline fueled like party type thing, carp fishing's the same. It goes from serenity to when that buzzer goes off to absolute hyper, like in 1 second. I actually think that they're fairly similar.
Yeah, maybe so.
And because carp fishing, you enjoy the nature side of it. It's all peaceful and beautiful, and you're taking it in. But in a heartbeat, it goes to the most exciting moment you've ever had. From that alarm. I mean, back when I was young, I used to come home and jump at the TV. Because in the early days, you stayed up all night listening for the beeps and all that, and then I'd get in on the Sunday. It's in my teens. I'd have had hardly any sleep, and parents are sat there watching something on TV, and there'd be a beep or a noise. I'd actually physically jump out the chair.
Yeah,
you were tuned into it, and so yeah, I think that kind of that dopamine chasing kind of buzz of the music, or that goosebumps on your arm you get when you hear a song that really means something to you. I think that's the same kind of dopamine rush you get when you get a bite, or if the fish turn up on you, and that apprehension, you wake up in the morning, they're nutting on your spot, that excitement. I think it's the same sort of dopamine receptors that are peaked. So yeah, there is a big like
similarity across. Yeah,
that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, definitely. So I'd got in this routine. I decided I was going to fish every day this week up until Miguel Campbell was playing, and so I'd been down. I'd pre-baited the day before. I'd put a couple of 5 key bags of I was using the Scope X squid or banana squid at the time, and I got down for my first night. I'd found this spot. I'd gone in this swim, and one of the Manchester lads was on there that night. I mean, it was quite funny because this was quite near the second gate, so you could hear exactly how many people were fishing a night because the gate would rattle. It'd rattle at 10 o'clock at night as people went over it, so you could count how many people went over. And then at 3, 4 in the morning, you'd hear it rattle again, so you knew if there was 6 on, if there was 8 on, or whatever. There was always 4 to 8 on every night. Whatever people tell you, we did it in the days. They're lying. People fished it at night. I know it has been caught in the day, but then people were doing the nights as well. They might go round to the day bank in the day, but they were definitely doing the nights as well. Anyone tells you different's a liar. I think there's one person since that made a beeline. I'm going to fish it in the days, but they were fishing the swim that was still kind of out of bounds. They had permission off the wardens to fish it. It was still where I couldn't fish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's still technically out of bounds for everyone else. But anyway, it's another story. So yeah, anyway, the first night of this, where I've decided I'm going to stay on the lake, when you had to reel in at 3, 4, so this swim was actually inside the first gate, but not in the main park over the second gate, and there was a lot of woods and stuff, so I could actually fish a little bit later. That's why I identified this area, because you could get like an extra hour or two's fishing in the morning before you had to reel in. So I'd stayed there in the morning a couple of times without fishing, so I knew the times that the wardens were coming in. Mm-hmm. So I knew that one came in at 5:30 and another one came in at 6. I'd had it timed every day. Anyway, I worked out if I fished this particular area, I could actually leave the rods until 5:45, which that's a key part of the morning on any lake, that sort of first hour or two of light. And you could fish 2 hours later. That's like 30-40% more rod hours than fishing anywhere else in the park, where you sort of had to be, if you were down the far end, which was like a mile away from this area, you had to be leaving at 3:30, 4:45 in the morning to make sure you were back, because it was quite open walking across there with your equipment, anyone going to work or anything, because there's people that lived inside the park as well as houses in there, so you could be seen. So I thought, right, this area here, which was actually in the same woods where Rich Seal had caught these fish, a few years before, or a year or two before, that extra bit of fishing I thought was worthy of being stuck away at one end of the lake. If I got a chance, it'd be a better chance. So like Mark Kipper, he was fishing that night, and he said hello to me as he walked past, and it was a pretty damp night. I'd got things a little bit easier at the time. I'd bought one of these bivvy bags, supposedly waterproof, that you could climb inside like an army thing. So still lay on the floor on the hard ground, but inside this bivvy bag. Anyway, it rained all night, and they weren't quite as waterproof as what I'd hoped. I was laying in a puddle, like there was an actual puddle in the bag, but I was a bit cold and miserable. As it got light, as it got to first light, the birds turned up on this spot. So I'd pre-baited this spot. It was nice and clean. It was a lovely little spot, 50 yards out, nice crack on it. Anyway, the birds had obviously found it, and I thought, bloody hell, is that why it's cracked? Because I'd put the 5 key bait on it.
Yeah.
And then I'd gone back and it was rock hard. I was like, wow, the fish have been on this. Anyway, started getting picked up by birds at first light. I was like, bugger, it's probably not the fish. It's probably the birds that have cleaned it. I was like, all despondent now, after feeling really confident when I'd cast out at 10 o'clock at night, thinking, the fish have been on it, I'm definitely going to catch. And then getting levered by the birds. Then Mark came past. He must have been fishing in the open, so he's had to come back earlier.
Yeah.
He popped his head in over the fence and said hello, anything happened. Oh, that's right. So on the night when he went down, he'd been there all day walking the lake. Anyway, all the fish were up the other end of the lake. He'd seen them in this like little, I forget what they call it now, spawning bay or something.
Duck pond.
Duck pond, that's right, yeah. So the fish were all in the duck pond. He said every single one of them was there, all the big ones. So I was feeling really despondent after getting my hard spot, thinking, right, the fish have cleaned it. I'm on. Mark's come down, gone to the duck pond and gone, yeah, all the fish have been there all day. I've been watching them. I was like, oh, no. and then, so in the morning when he's come back, I was like, right, what have you had? And he went, nothing. It was just one of them. He went, no, they buggered off at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever. They all went. I was like, all right. And then, but now I'm getting picked up by the ducks. I'm wet. I'm laying a puddle. I'm thinking, right, I'll give it another 45 minutes and then I'll have to go. I'm feeling a bit despondent now. Anyway, literally, Mark was probably up at the top gate. I've had a ripper. Same thing, actually. I got picked up by the ducks again, thinking I actually looked out. There was ducks there, pulled my head back under this bivvy bag thing, going, I'm going to reel in a minute. But I was so tired and wet and miserable. I was just like, I'll give it half an hour. Just haven't got it in me to reel in now.
Yeah.
and then it's beeped again. And I was like, fucking ducks, like that. But the beep was slightly different to the duck beep that had just happened. It was slightly different. And something inside me tweaked that I was like, actually, that didn't seem like a duck. And just as I'm thinking that, I've just started pulling the bivvy bag off my head again just to look out. It's just gone, whee! Anyway, there was a swan right over the spot. And it's quite shallow here. I'd say it's maybe swan depth. Might have been 5 foot, might have been 6 foot. I don't know. But it's possible the swan could have picked the line up. And I've been hammered by ducks. I'm feeling miserable. And it's one-toned. And there's a duck a swan right above the spot. So I'm like, it's 50-50 this. Like, pick the rod up. And the duck's powering now. Swan's powering like from right to left. And so's the fish. So I'm like, fucking hell, I've got a swan.
That's not what you want at all.
Anyway, and then, like, as I'm, like, cranking it, the swan's gone a kind of a different way to where the line's going. Like, so I'm like, oh, it is a fish. But still in the back of my mind, no, it can't be the swan. It can't be. It's going that way. And the swan's now going that way. And anyway, turned out to be Jim's fish, 48 pound, which was like one of the 2 biggest fish. But we didn't really know what was in there at the time. It was all still a little bit up in the air. So this is my first night of, what's going to be 5 days and nights, because my plan was to stay and chill in the daytimes. I was going to dump all my gear in the woods, leave it, and then just walk the lake and look for fish all day and whatever. Anyway, I caught one of the big ones on the first day.
You caught one of the ones.
Yeah. So I'm ringing Mark. He's not answering the phone. He's obviously still, I think he just got home as he picked the phone up. I was like, can you come back? I need a picture. And I've got one of the big ones. I said, I don't know what it is, but it's a big common. I hadn't got it out of the water or anything. It was just in the net. So I put all my gear away, left the net in the water, packed everything up, dumped it in the bushes, and waited for him to come back. He's ended up coming back. We've done the pictures. And because I'm there all week, I was like, should we go? There was a Knutsford Services right nearby. I said, I'll take you for a breakfast. We'll go and get breakfast in the services, celebrate. So I had no intention of leaving the lake. Anyway, the gates are still locked, it's still before it's been opened. As I've jumped over the gate, I've caught my finger on the rip bit, because I'm all adrenaline up and hyper. Caught my finger anyway, nearly took my finger off, so I don't know if you can see that nasty, scar that goes from there all the way up. It was...
What a scar that is. The old Jim's fish scar.
I knew it was bad. Like, it's agony, and it's just blood everywhere. My finger was completely open to the bone. Most people, I know people that have lost their fingers on those same, not the Tatton ones, but those same anti-climb fences, like that. They're designed to do exactly that.
They're not very forgiving.
And as I caught it, as I was jumping down, it caught on the bottom and it ripped all the way down. I heard it. It made me feel sick, because I saw it and heard it as it happened. Anyway, I can't drive or anything. I'm holding it. I know, Mark, you need to get me to an hospital. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he took me to Wythenshawe Hospital. I was in there all day. They've opened it up and tended. It's bad when they're bringing other doctors in as they're walking past. They're going, come and look at this.
Oh, no.
It was horrible. Anyway, but all I'm thinking about, I was on my first night, I've caught one of the big ones. I've got a spot going, and now I can't fish. Not only that, Mark knows exactly where I've caught it from, because he's just caught the things. Anyway,
where's your kit at this time?
He
stashed it, or is it with Mark?
It's a very good point. I think Mark might have gone back and got it for me, actually. I can't remember, actually. Yeah, I don't think I had it with me. Unless I did take it off because we were going to go for food. I can't remember, actually.
It's not like the Mere, is it, where you've got loads of places to stash, like, not that you know what I mean? There isn't. It's quite open, like you said.
I'm pretty sure I've still got a dinghy on there somewhere in one of the copses. In fact, I know, unless somebody's had it, it was well hidden. So I've gone to the hospital, I've got home, they've told me you can't get it wet or anything because of infection. I've got massive bandages, it's just a big white mummified thing with my entire hand. And I just feel physically sick. So I'm like, I need to get back. But obviously I know that Mark and his mate Sam, they're going to be in the swim. Because why wouldn't you? You know, we're all in the same boat, and I could be out of action for a month. Anyway, after the throbbing, the pain for the first 3 days was incredible, because they've had to open it all up to clean it and whatever, make sure the tendons aren't damaged and all the other stuff. Your fingers just got millions of sensitive things in it.
Yeah.
After day 3, I'm going in the garden picking a rod up, thinking, would I physically be able to cast? Day 3, no. Day 4, no. Day 5, no. Day 6. Anyway, in the meantime, they've had 3 fish out of my swim. My spot. They were taking it in turns fishing it every night, and they had fish. I don't know how many they had that week, but at least 3, and maybe lost 1 or 2. But they hadn't had any big ones. I think they had that 2-tone common you were talking about, £32 or something like that. Anyway, so it was just over a week, and I'm just itching to get back. This is that obsession again. I was just like, I've just had a 48 pounder. Like, we don't know what's in there. Could be a British record in there for all I know. Certainly, like, Cheshire record. And what on earth am I going to do? So anyway, it was just over a week, and I thought, I reckon I could fish now. I reckon I could hold a rod. So I've been back twice to the doctors. They'd redressed it, and every time the dressing was getting a bit smaller, so rather than having a big mummy hand, I've now just got this hand and the fingers. Anyway, after about 7 or 8 days, I worked out that I could cast a rod. So now my worry is keeping it dry and not getting it wet, in case it gets infected, because the last thing I want to do is lose my hand, because they said you could lose your finger if it gets infected. Anyway, so I worked out that I could cast if I had a plastic bag, but I kept it on for 24 hours in the house thinking, can I actually do it with the bag? And it was all sweating and condensation inside it. But anyway, I thought, right, I can fish now. So I ended up going back to the lake thinking, right, well, it's going to fit. Mark and the other guy have had a few fish out of this swim. It's going to feel like their swim now. I only did 1 night in it, and now they've been in it all week. So I need to find another swim. So there was another swim a bit further down. We called it the Oak Trees. Like, it was it was in the main park and then over another fence as well. It was like a little spit with an oak tree in the middle of it. And then, so when did this happen? So one of the times, I've missed a bit out. So before I had Jim's fish, I was fishing in the main park one day. And the reason why I chose that area was when I was walking back by this oak tree, there was, I must have seen 100 shows. So I'm leaving it at 4 in the morning from the main park. I'm walking back, and as I've gone past the oak tree, I heard something, looked out, and there's fish showing one after the other. They were like dolphins. So that's the reason why I ended up pre-baiting the swim that I caught Jim's frosh. So this swim was just over the fence in the main park, whereas there was 20 yards away from where all these fish were. I could fish longer in the woods and not have to reel in at 4 o'clock, which I would have had to by this oak tree because it was in the main park. So it was kind of like a compromise. It wasn't exactly where I saw the fish showing, but it was the nearest place to him, and I could get an extra couple of hours fishing. So that's why I pre-baited that area and then ended up catching Jim's. Then I couldn't fish for a week. So now I'm going back. My swim's gone. So I'll start fishing this oak tree. It's a little bit more difficult because I've got an extra fence to go over and I'm a bit more vulnerable in the open, but I'll do it anyway. So I went the night before I went back. I got this dinghy that I said is still in the bushes. Got that dinghy, baited up pretty heavily, a couple of 5 key bags on an area, and then fished it my first night back with me hand all
bagged up,
food bagged and whatever. Anyway, I ended up having a bite. I had 2 bream just after dark, thinking, oh no, bream are on me. I hadn't had any bream at this point. And then just at first light next morning, I had a fish It was a £20 common. It ended up getting completely weeded up. I never actually got it to the bank. I've weighed it out like up to my chest. Just it's getting light. I'm a bit worried about wardens coming and all that. With this bagged up hand, I've got the rod up in the air, but it could be a British record or something. It could be a £50 common, who knows? So I've gone out anyway. This fish, I've managed to get it like just in front of me. I've dropped the net and everything's going wrong, but I'm conscious about getting my hand wet. As soon as I realised it wasn't a lump, I wasn't that fussed, if I lost it. Anyway, it ended up pulling out in the weed with me faffing about.
Trying to do it with one hand.
Scoop it with my hands, so I wasn't too fussed about it. Anyway, so I'd had a bite from this new area, so I was quite happy. They were on as well in my old swim that night. They didn't catch anything. I'd had the only bite plus a couple of bream. I fished another couple of nights in that swim anyway, because it was a nice way of fishing, because you had no torches. You were very alert at night. You were sitting up all night, so I was like kind of half sleeping, half awake, but sat upright by this oak tree. It was quite comfortable, and in the middle of the night, because you've got no radio or anything that you'd normally have in a bivvy, you'd be cooking and distracted, making noises, making brews. So you're not always alert to the lake. This, you were alert for every second that you were there, and I heard on about my third night in this oak tree, I heard some boshes down to my right. I couldn't tell exactly where it was, but at least 100 or 250 yards to my right, more into the open park, so a bit more risky to actually fish. But I was like, I wasn't that comfortable being so close to the other spot where they were fishing. I was thinking that I wanted another area.
Complete fresh,
Yeah. And anyway, so this night, being sat up all night, I'd heard these boshes to my right. And I was thinking, right, I'm going to get the dinghy, I'm going to stick 10 key bait out there, and I'm going to fish further into the park where I've heard these boshes. So I did exactly that. I think it was the weekend now, so I had to work all weekend. And then I've come down the Sunday night, I didn't fish. I thought, right, I'm going to get the dinghy, go out, put 10 key bait out in this new area, roughly where I think the fish are. Then I'm going to go back and fish it 2 days after that, which is what I did. So I went back, flicked the rods out. So I've put the 2 rods out where I've baited up, and I've got a third rod with me as well, which was a chod, which I always took as an emergency. I hate chods, but it's just an emergency rod in case there was no spots. Like, at least one rod's fishing.
Yeah, you're fishing, exactly.
Yeah, so as I'm getting rods on this area that I baited, because I haven't leaded around or anything, I was hoping it was clean. I think when I baited it, I did prod around, and I knew it was reasonably clean, so I wasn't from the boat. As I'm getting them rods started, I kept seeing like little rings, sort of breamy sized rings, but to the left, same distance that I baited up, but a good 50 yards to the left. And I was thinking, right, I'll put the chod rod there.
Yeah.
It probably happened 3 times while I'm distracted. I never actually saw what was making the ring, but because I was looking at my spot, and I thought, right, well, that's where the other rod's going if it is bream. They were very small rings, which, carp do it sometimes if they're just poking their nose out.
Subtle, yeah.
Yeah, subtle anyway. So I've put the rod out. I've got my bivvy bag. I was bringing a sleeping bag by now, a pretty thin one. I was actually getting quite comfortable, so I was actually starting to fall asleep at night. So I was getting like 3 hours sleep, and it was getting easier and easier the longer I was doing it.
It sounds really easy, mate, this.
I lost a stone in weight because I was walking 3-4 miles every day, from where you parked the car, and you were marching with the equipment on your back. It was. I lost a stone in 3 weeks, I would say, just doing this walking. Anyway, so it was actually quite nice. There was like, obviously when it rains, it's made like a groove going down to the lake, almost like a little stream bed almost. It was just the width of a person, and it ran down the hill. It was actually quite comfortable to lay in. So I've laid my bivvy bag down in that. I was thinking, this is quite comfortable. I can sleep here. So, and it's away from the rod, so you didn't feel as you could actually leave your equipment if you wanted, and shoot off if anybody came. Anyway, as I'm setting up, actually getting the rod sorted, there was a mountain biker. Bear in mind the park's locked, so there was a guy on a mountain bike, and he stared at me as he went past this little path. I was thinking, is he going to grass? Is he going to grass me up? Is he like, what's going on? And he looked at me and he double taked as if to say, I know you're not supposed to be here. And I was, so in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, somebody going to come back, or the warden's going to turn up in the middle of the night. And then, anyway, I've ended up getting sorted, got the 3 rods out. I've thought, right, I'll get my head down now. It's dark now. I can lay in this little stream gully bit that was, it was really comfortable, actually. I'm fast asleep. I was using the sirens at the time, the original ones. I had the receiver right by my head. Super low, so the heads were off, you know, on the rod, and then just the receiver here, so only I could hear it. Anyway, it woke me up. Just you just wake up to a one toner and you don't know where you are, just screaming. Anyway, it was this left hand chod rod, and I hate chod rigs. Like, I've probably had 50% of the fish fall off that I've ever had on a chod rig. I just don't like them. I lost a real big one out of church late once.
All hook poles?
On the chod. Yeah, hook poles. Yeah, I just don't think they're that efficient rigs. They're good when you've got no other option, but not on clean bottoms. Anyway, it was super clean. And the one I lost out of church late was on a clean bottom. I should have changed the rig over. I was too lazy. And it was a spot I'd baited for a couple of days right in front of the lodge. And it was a lump, and it came off just before I netted it. I was sick. Anyway, so this is in the back of my mind. I'm playing this fish. And it shook its head at first. I've seen these little rings that might have been bream, and now I've got a really breamy type feeling on this. And I was like, but I also knew that I've had the amount of big fish that I've had, fat fish, that also do the same thing because they've not got the power to churn off. That they've got used to shaking their head to try and drop the hooks. And so in the back of my mind, but then I'm thinking, son, chod rig, and I hate him, and I always lose fish on the chod rig. I played it in, and I just knew it was the big one all the way because it was kept shaking its head. I knew, boshed it in the net, and it was undoubtedly the barrel. It was the fattest fish I've ever seen. It was huge. Obviously, I've run up to my old swim. The 2 lads that were fishing in there, the ones that had swiped me swim. I was like, I think I've got it. I've got a really big common in the net anyway. I'm pretty sure it's the barrel. We've actually rung, because it's at very early hours. It's just getting light. It's maybe 4 o'clock in the morning or something. We've actually rung Rich Seal, who's the reason why I was fishing. He came down for the pictures. Roger came as well. He knew if he got a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning, he knew why. So I had everybody there. The 2 Manchester Park Lake lads, Roger and Rich, and we got the pictures done. 54 Cheshire record, I think it was 54.6 or 54.10 or something like that.
That's an unbelievable. They're 2 unbelievable fish, mate. I think I said on a debate podcast we did, I think they are the 2. Like, not only are they commons, but the lengths you have to go through that you've described to sort of put yourself even in contention, let alone catch them. There's something else, mate. Those fish, I think, incredible.
And all that, losing me swim and nearly losing a finger and like just that determination to get back, but just the hardcoreness of that routine I managed to make it work really well with my daughter, with the family life. I literally probably had a more stable family life than driving 3 hours down south, because I was there at morning, I was there for dinner in the evening, did my work in the afternoons, I slept in the mornings, and I fished all night. Like it just worked perfect. I think I'd done 11 straight days or something at this point. But I'd had the 2 days off at the weekend in the bar, the Friday, Saturday, and I think I'd done 11 straight days after that. We're planning to do every day that month, but obviously I caught them. So,
mate, there's some fish.
It was hardcore. It was the most draining thing I've ever done on my body.
Would you have any close shaves with sort of wardens, people, other anglers? Because as you say, I didn't think, and there isn't a lot of people in the wider aspect that actually took up the challenge to fish it consistently, but I didn't realise there was that many people there that you could hear them through the gate. Yeah,
there was quite a few. So there's actually 2 stories. One was the one that put Roger off forever. This was in the early days before I'd caught anything, I think. So we've fished it over this second gate into the main park, actually a little bit past where I was just telling you about, where I heard the fish and then ended up catching the barrel. And there was a little copse of trees behind us, which is where my dinghy is, if it's still there. There was a little copse of trees that was kind of behind a fence. You had to jump over it to get in, like a little fenced off bit. Anyway, we fished in front of this. Roger hasn't fished it for a couple of weeks after that first night that had wiped him out for a bit. It's got dark. It's about 11 o'clock at night. And then we saw headlights on the opposite bank, like headlights, like 3 in a row, like 3 vehicles coming down the track opposite us on the other side of the lake. We've crapped ourselves immediately. It's like, it's a raid.
We're in trouble here,
We're
boys.
getting raided, like 3 vehicles, like 11 o'clock. It was midnight it was. 3 vehicles, midnight. We've all panicked. Our phones have gone. The other lads that are a bit further up have gone, you seen them? What's that? What's that? Is it police? Can you see who it is? We've literally thrown everything we can into the cops because we're like, if they turn right at the end of the lake, then they're coming for us. Anyway, all the vehicles turned right, so I kick my alarms into the water, like because we're having to be quick. Half the gear thrown into the cops behind me, and half of it's gone in the lake, like out of sight. And we've basically run up the back. These vehicles have come right, and then they need to come right again to come to us. Anyway, they've carried on going up this hill, but we're done. We're like, we can't carry on fishing.
Yeah, this is
We've no idea what's going on. Anyway, turns out it was. We went back the next day to get all the equipment that was in the water and stuff. But turns out it was. They have a big flower show on there every year, and it was all the lorries from Holland arriving with all the flowers. I found it out when I came back the next day to get the gear. There was all signs on the motorway saying "Flower Show Tatton Park." I was like, "Fuck! It's the lorries that have come in overnight from to set up." For the...
But you're on that high alert, aren't you? On there in that
super high alert. Yeah, I kicked all the gear in. Me alarm, them sirens, they still worked. They were
Did
underwater.
you get everyone
yeah,
back?
I got it all back the next day. We've legged it. We bailed all of us from that. I had another night. It was the only Friday night I ever fished. I didn't realise there was a scout hut up at the back behind us, and they all come down to the lake. They make rope swings. So I was fishing in front of this same copse of trees, and all I hear is voices like 10, 11 at night. They must have been in the scout hut and then come down for like a late night play. You know, all these torches come from nowhere. I can hear voices. I knew it was kids, so I knew it wasn't a raid. But obviously my rods are still in the water. I've just gone down. I've turned the alarms off, so in case I get a run or something, they won't hear it. And I've had to jump in the copse of trees and wait. They were there till about midnight, like jumping in the water and rope swings and all. So right by my rods, like 20 yards away from my rods. That was another night. Anyway, the biggest, closest shave where it was actually Warden's was when I was fishing in that oak tree. So I think it was one of the first days back after I'd done my finger. The other 2 lads were fishing up there. Anyway, I knew they were in my old swim. I've said hello to them on the way in. I've gone down to the oak tree. Anyway, it must have been the first night after a weekend because I was exhausted. I was trying to stay awake back then. Anyway, I must have fell asleep just before first light. Which is, don't forget, I've got to go earlier than the other lads because I'm in the main park. Yeah. And anyway, luckily, them 2, they've packed up and gone. They've left it to the last possible minute, 10 to 6, when the warden comes at 6 or whatever. They've left it to the last possible minute and gone, that's weird. Jamie's not said goodbye, on the way out. And they were going to go and they went, should we just go and check? Should we just go and check on him? And they came and I was fast asleep up against the tree. All my rods still out. There's stuff strewn everywhere. Like, they've woke me up. Jay, it's 6 o'clock. And as they've done that, the warden's car's come on the other side of the lake. So it's going to go down the lake. It's going to turn right at the end and then right again. Because the oak tree's right in front of the second gate, which is locked. So he's got to unlock it. And I mean, right in front of it is, if we're fishing here at the end of my living room, the gate's where the other window is there. It's, what's that?
You're joking.
12 yards or something. If that. 12 yards away, and there's no way of getting my kit away. It's impossible. Like, we haven't got enough time to put everything away. My rods are still out in the water. But they're with me as well, with rucksacks on the back. Anyway, as the cars come round, I've literally thrown what I could, some bits into the water, tried to stack as much up behind the oak tree as I could. And as it's got closer, we've all just had to lay down flat on the ground. Still, there's no way we could have hidden. There was nowhere to go. It was too quick. So all 3 of us, face in the mud, literally lay flat down, praying that he doesn't look over. But obviously we know any movement that's what alerts people's attention. We didn't even have to say it to each other, but we're all experienced enough to know that you just can't move an inch. We just got to lay down and hope for the best. We've heard the Land Rover stop right behind us. You know where that window is. It stopped. We've heard the gate open. So now what he does, this is our exit road as well. He drives up, opens the top gate at the end. Then he's going to turn around and he's going to come back through our gate. So I know we've probably got a minute or less. So once he's gone through the gate, didn't see us, I've started packing up a bit more stuff, throwing stuff in the rucksack, knowing that any second now I'm going to have to hit the deck again and lay on the floor. And again, they can't go anywhere because they've got to go the way that he's just gone. So same thing, as soon as we've got 1 minute, blah, 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 took as much cover as we could, thrown as much stuff in, and then just lay flat. The only good thing is when he comes back, he's no reason to stop because the gate's now open.
It's free, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, we've heard the Land Rover coming back. We've all face down on the deck. I could hear my heart in my brain. I could physically hear every beat. It's only a couple of times I've been that scared in my life. And because you're not scared of getting caught. What can they do? You might get a fine in court. It was more the losing the fishing that you were bothered about. It was being rumbled because they're going to be checking every day if they caught us, if they found us. So again, as it's come back, all three of us are laying in the dirt, literally face down, trying not to move. And luckily he's gone straight past. But that was one of the closest shaves I've ever had for anything.
Roll on the camo, mate. How he's not Twig G boys is ridiculous.
No, it's and we were 10 yards from him less, blatant late.
It's not even like a drop that
no, it's flat. It's flat as a pancake. Do you know what I'm talking about? That oak tree.
I know exactly where you are.
Right.
I was like, that is you're literally in the. You can't. It's like a field and someone lying in it. You can't.
Yeah, just lay right next to him. But we all just knew, don't move. Because it's what it's like if you're watching fish in the edge. That you can stand there blatant and stare at the fish, but the second you move or twitch, it knows, and it's gone. And it was the same sort of thing. You've just got to be totally static, which we were. Just all three of us face down, rucksacks, everything.
I can't believe you made it out. To be fair play. That is some chapter, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, it was exciting times. Again, the achievement of that feeling of it's back to that chase and that goal, that feeling of catching a target fish. I remember sitting on Elstow, sitting on St Ives was another tricky one, low stock, 35 acres, one fish you want to catch, the big one. That feeling of thinking, why would I catch that one fish in all that expanse of water? Why? And then you do it, and then you do it again on another lake, and you do it again on another lake. It's as high as any high I've ever had in my life for anything, from your baby being born to the best tablet you've ever had in a festival to you name it. It's one of the biggest adrenaline dopamine rushes you could ever have. Just that single target, and the amount of times I've sat on lakes and going, why would I catch it?
That's interesting as well. Just you thinking that, because you wouldn't think that you'd have that. You know what I mean? The typical sort of big fish mindset is, I'll have it, it will die, or I'll catch it. They're you sort of cliche saying, but it's interesting that you're saying that you have those thoughts of I don't know where my first bite or whatever's going to come from, and also why would it be me?
Why would it be me? And not just why would it be me? Why would it be anybody? If you take, a big fish is going to fill up 1 metre square, say, and how many thousands of metre squares are there in this lake? Why would that, where my hook bait is there, why would that fish at any given moment be sat there eating it? Especially if it gets caught once every 2 years. Some of them low stock fish from back in the day, they get caught once every couple of years. So you sat there going, not only why would it be on that particular spot in this entire expanse of water, it gets caught once every couple of years. It just seems the odds are against it, but you do it and you do it again. You see other people do it, and it gives you that confidence, and it has happened. I do believing you'll catch it makes a difference. Why me and not somebody else can be mindset, I think.
Do you think?
I'm a very big believer in visualization, actualization. The first it's a little bit of a tangent, but the first big poker, when I had that online one that I won, it was like 126,000 or something, just before I went to Slovenia. Every professional poker player, and there's millions of brilliant ones, 100 times better than me, everybody wants to win this tournament that I won. Anyway, on my birthday 6 months before, in the August, I had a vision board in my office. It's still upstairs now, and this figure's still written on it. I've just read a book, and it was talking about they'd followed some students from 18 years old. I think it was at Oxford and Cambridge years ago. It was a study, and they basically tracked them every 5 years up until late in life. So they followed this group of students. I think it was Oxford and Cambridge, and they were mainly looking at how successful they were in life. They were privileged. They've gone to like highest education sort of places, and how that worked out later on in life. And I forget the exact figures, so I'm bro sciencing some of this, but so the people that didn't know what they wanted to do when they were at uni, they looked at their average earnings, at age 25, 35, 50 or whatever. I think the dog's barking at something in there now. Can you hear it? Yeah. What's Gizmo barking at?
What's he found?
Anybody who walks past, he likes barking.
We'll let the dogs off, mate. It's all right.
So, to cut the story short, because I forget the exact figures. There he is. But the people that didn't know what they wanted to do in life, their average earnings for that group of people were X amount. The people that had half an idea, they had some goals, or some sort of target. Maybe they knew they wanted to be a vet, or maybe they knew they wanted to do this. They on average earned 10 times what the people that didn't know, all gone to the same unis. They earn on average 10 times what the group that didn't actually know what they wanted to do. Their average earnings were 10 times. The people that actualized their thing, so they physically wrote it down or did something about it. I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. I think they were something like 20 times the other two groups added together.
Jeez.
Their average earnings. Yeah. So from the people that actualized and visualized their goal, they might not have done the thing that they wanted to do, but the fact that they actually wrote it down and did something about whatever the goal was. Anyway, so I'm reading this study. There's 2 or 3 things similar that I got into at the time, and it's a big thing. I mean, I don't know if you know my friend the fisherman Salado. He's like really big DJ, quite a few £1 million a year DJs, residences at Ushuaia and whatever. He's fisherman James. He's had some bits off Nash and stuff. I think.
I think he's pretty a friend of the brand.
Yeah, he is definitely. I've done a bit of tour managing and travelling with him this last couple of years. I spent a hell of a lot of time with James. Anyway, he's had a right colourful life before.
Right.
Very colourful. Like it's his story, not mine. So I won't tell you, but put it this way, it's jaw dropping. Anyway, at one point in his life, he was like, I can't live this life anymore, and the only thing I know is music. I need to do this, and he ended up bumping into a guy that he'd known from years ago, Mark, who was a dubstep producer from back in the day. They ended up getting a studio in Manchester. They had no money. They were living on the floor of the studio. Anyway, they had a vision board in the studio. Every stage they wanted to play on, they had pictures of. Every festival they wanted to play at. We want songs released on this label. We want songs released on this label. I mean, I was actually with them last weekend in Gran Canaria, and there's even more to this story than what I remember. Like, some of the things that were on there was every single thing happened within the first 12 months. Every single stage, every single festival, every song every label they wanted to release songs on. They ticked them off one by one, and I was actually with Mark last week, and I forget what it is now. There was actually something more to this story that was even more unbelievable. It was something like the date on one of the stages. It was like August the 7th, whatever it was. they ended up actually getting the gig at that place on that same date that was on the picture on their vision board from years before.
That's mad, isn't it?
They actually ticked it off, yeah. So my bit of it was, so my whiteboard upstairs that's in my office, after reading these sorts of studies and books, I put down that I wanted to have 150 grand in the bank by my birthday next year, August the 14th, the following year. Anyway, life was okay at that point. I'd planned to move to Slovenia. I was reasonably comfortable. I'd met Kasper in Slovenia. We'd set up the holiday company, and I was moving on the 1st of April, ready to get our customers on the 1st of May. So I think we had 20 odd customers. Alex was one of them, actually, from Clearwater. Yeah. He was one of the first groups. He brought 6 people over, I think. And literally the week before I went, I won that poker tournament for 126 grand. Completely forgot I'd written this thing on the board that I wanted 150 grand in the bank. So I had no idea I was going to end up with 150 grand. All my businesses don't add up to anything like that, during the course of a year. I had no idea I was going to do it. Totally forgot about it. I'd moved away that year to Slovenia. I came back in the winter for a little bit. I came back in December for a week, and I walked into my office and I looked at the board and saw the 150 grand. I went, I did it, and I didn't even know. Okay, it wasn't 150, it was 120, but it doesn't matter. The fact that I'd written 150 grand on the board and had absolutely no idea how I was ever going to see that money. And I did it, and I forgot that I'd even actualised it. I totally forgot.
It's crazy, isn't it?
This poker tournament, there's 7,000 people enter it every Sunday. Every single brilliant player wants to win that tournament. Why did I win it? At a time I didn't even need it, like life was okay. It made things a bit better. We got a slightly nicer house in Slovenia we would have done. It gave us all the money to set the company up, and, we could do everything to a slightly better standard. But everybody, there's 7,000 people enter that every single Sunday, and most of the best players in the world will never win that in their life. And yet I wrote this thing on the board without any intention of playing poker. I'd stopped playing poker. I was playing for fun. But
also, you think that if you took that route a bit further, the sort of mathematical probability of you, if you took into account all your experience and your poker expertise, if you actually winning that, is a lot smaller than, I guarantee, a lot of the people that enter those fields as well. So you're talking about something that you're putting down, and you're talking about this working and the study. But by the reverse effect, if you use the same science, it don't make any sense any which way you look at it, does it?
No, but except for positive mindset, and maybe we can control the world a little bit more than we think. There's a lot of examples of exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, that bit Mark told me last week about. I knew the story of they ticked off every visualization bit, but they actually, the day they got booked at this, whatever, it might have been that Kappa Future Festival, there's like iconic pictures of this big, long, like sort of crowd under a big marquee tent type thing. It's iconic. If you ever, now I've mentioned it, you'll probably see it in every DJ wants to play there, all the top ones. But not only did they get booked there, after 5 years, it was on the exact date that was on the picture on the vision board.
Crazy,
mind blowing.
Carp fishing wise, for all your big carp, was that a case for you? Did you have something tangible? Did you write something down? Did you do that? Every
time it was after I made a plan. So I might have fished aimlessly for a while and then gone, right, I need to bait up on all the wins, or I need to do this, or I need to get on the lake. It was always when I'd come up with a strategy or decided to fish a swim near to the fish, or, every lake's been different key to catching the big one, but it's always been after I formulated a plan, and the plans come after aimlessly fishing for a bit, and then you formulate the plan. It's always worked every time.
That's weird, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, it's back to actualizing something, having that goal, working out how you're going to do it. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't actually go the same way that you planned. I think having the plan is
the thing. Take me to Yateley, mate. You referenced it before. We've talked about an iconic Northern chapter. Take me to Yateley, because at this time when we're at Yateley has been publicised. It's popular. Not popular, but it has been sort of notified. It's got some incredible fish. It's had some incredible anglers on it. What drew you down to those realms, mate?
It was the next journey. I think it was after Elstow and then the Colmere fish, the banana common. I'd had that year, and I was like, I was invincible then. That Colmere fish was a rumour; it had never been caught. I've spoke about that one at length a few times. We don't need to go over that, but the other company's podcast.
Mostly politically correct. Solid.
Other podcasts are available, but this one was the Corder one. Yeah, I told that story in quite a bit of detail on there, so I won't go over it. But I felt invincible. This fish was a rumour, and it was not. It was like the impossible. I ended up catching it. I think it was 7 fish in the lake. I had 5 bites or 6 bites or something. And after that all happened, like came to its conclusion, the Yateley ticket had dropped on the door. I'd put my name on the list a couple of years before, and it turns out it was the year that Darryl Peck was on there. Terry Earn had gone back to try and catch the one he hadn't caught, which was Arthur, I think. I think he hadn't caught Arthur and one of the others. He'd gone back on there that year. It was the year of the full timers. Darren Miles was on there. It was the year Steve Pagulatos caught the Black Mirror. I was there that night. It was a very iconic year in the more modern times, from back in the day. I was a little bit naive. It's actually a bit of a non-entity for me as far as all the stories that I've got, because for the first time I was at a massive disadvantage. So, I'd do my work at the weekends. I'd turn up at a lake at first light on a Monday morning. I'd always have the pick of the lake, whatever the plan was that needed to be done, I could always do it. Yateley was different. There was 10 full-timers already in swims on an 8-acre lake, that might have had 14 swims. 10 of them were gone. The top 10 swims were gone every Monday when I got there. I was just lost most weeks, and I was a little bit in awe. I was a lot younger, a bit more naive. I ended up catching one of the original single scale in December, and it's no accident that I caught in December, because it's the first time I was actually fishing. It's the first time that all the full-timers had dropped off. There was 4 or 5 of us that were sticking at it every week through the winter. 4 of us actually that were there every week, midweek through the winter. And it was the first time I actually felt like I was angling. And I ended up catching single 1st of December, I think it was. It was PB at the time, 44, but it was quite a disappointing year for me. I got very close to having it right off. So, again, I've told this story on the other podcast, but basically there was one swim I hadn't done a fish for 2 years called the Bars. And because pre-baiting had worked for me on every other lake before this, like the only way you could pre-bait on such a busy lake was to pick a swim that nobody wanted to fish. Nobody wanted to fish that swim. I pre-baited it for 2 weeks. I came down with the intention of fishing it, and the curly was free. So I think it was John Mack that had been fishing the curly every week, because the full-timers stuck to the same swim. It was a bit of an unwritten rule. They all left each other alone rather than competing. They all picked a swim each, and they fished it every single week. They'd pull off on a Friday. The weekenders would come on the Saturday. They'd come back on a Saturday night, ready for when the weekenders left on a Sunday. And then they would fish Sunday through to the following Friday. It was the same routine every week. Terry Earn was fishing Trumptons. John Claridge was fishing the one next to Trumptons. John Mack was fishing the curly. So-and-so was fishing Desi's swim. Like, it was the same every week. It was horrible. In hindsight, there was opportunities I had to catch. If I knew what I know now then, that I could have had more fish, I think. But
in what way?
There was a fish called, there was a swim called, it'll come to me in a minute, the name of the swim, but it's where I actually caught single from. That swim was free all year. Nobody had it selected as, it was one of the 3 or 4 swims you could get in every week. And it ended up doing 3 fish throughout the season, plus single that I caught. It did heather. Terry Earn actually had heather from there. He moved. He kept seeing this big fish jumping, and ended up moving into that swim and catching heather for the second time. He wasn't on there for that, but he couldn't ignore this big fish that kept jumping. I could have caught that. We all saw that fish jumping in front of that swim. If I'd have just stuck to that swim, I might have caught it. The Back Bay did 3 fish throughout the year. That was free every week. I could have got in. In hindsight, like, there was opportunities that I missed. Anyway, I'd baited the Bars for a couple of weeks. I came down. John Mack wasn't there for some reason that week, and the curly was free. Now, the curly is an autumn swim, and it's actually next to the bars, but you've got to like go out the path, and you can't see the lake when you walk to the curly, and then you walk back into the swim and you can see the lake again. Because there's big bushes in between, like they're different.
Yeah,
different bits of water. Anyway, I just got sucked into the curly. I was like, the curly's free. It might be my only chance to get in it this year. So even though I'd baited the bars and planned to fish the bars, I was like, I might not get another chance going to curly. So I stood in the bars looking, didn't see nothing, walked off the lake back to the curly, stood there for half an hour, looked, didn't see nothing, walked back to the bars. Did this 3 or 4 times. Anyway, I've decided, right, I'm going to go get my gear from the car and go in the curly. And as I'm setting up in the curly, Terry Earn's setting up in the bars. He was opposite watching me, right? I was like, what are you doing round here? And he went, I thought you'd seen him and then you set up in the curly. I went, what do you mean? And he went, every time you turned your back to walk out to go to the other swim, one stuck its head up, like right where you'd been baiting. And he went, I couldn't ignore it. He said, as you turned the last one, the fish washed. I said, I thought you'd seen it. Yeah. And then you went and got your gear and went in the curly. He went, so I can't ignore it. Anyway, I was like, fuck. I've messed up here.
I've had a night.
I felt sick because I know Terry's on for a week, right? He does till Friday anyway. So I've got to bed that night, pretty pissed off. I've woke up in the morning, Daryl's in the swim. I've gone, what? Daryl's in the bars. I was like, hey?
Yeah.
Where's Terry? And he went, he had to go and do tight lines. He got a phone call to go and record tight lines, which was on Sky Sports at the time, and he's gone. He said, as he was leaving the lake in the car park at 6 o'clock this morning, I was just arriving, and he went, get in the bars, there's loads of fish showing. Daryl had 3 fish that session. No. There's 9 mirrors in the lake. I think he had 3 of them that session. Chunky was the first one. While I pre-baited it for weeks. Oh,
that is sick.
It's not done a bite for 2.5 years. And I was about to go in it and got dragged into the curly, even though I know it's an autumn swim and it wasn't autumn. Like, my own stupid fault.
What?
You know,
I'd be so.
But Daryl made his name that year off that lake, mostly out of that swim. And the odds of him arriving as Terry's leaving, the odds of Terry not doing the whole week, like, it wasn't meant to be for me.
No, fair dues.
When I've won some of these poker tournaments, I couldn't do wrong. Like, it was like I knew everything was going to drop right. And by the same token, I think sometimes it's not your day. And for some reason, that season was not my season. I had to work really hard. I ended up having 2 fish. I had single scale and I had one of the original commons. But that twist of fate of every time I turned my back, one showed and I didn't see it. Terry going in there, who'd normally been there till Friday, who actually got a phone call and had to leave. And as he's leaving, Daryl wouldn't have gone in there if he hadn't met Terry in the car park. If they hadn't have turned up, it's all that sliding doors or you know, it was one of them things. And don't get me wrong, I might not have caught 3 fish out of that swim. You know, Daryl's an exceptional angler. I'm not taking anything away, but it was his time and it wasn't my time. And I never wanted to make a living out of fishing either, and he did, you know. So there's reasons why things happen, you know. I'm probably one of the only anglers in the country that's been offered money from a company and turned it down. You know, Alan offered me $5,000 a year a few years ago, and I said no. I said I don't want any pressure on me fishing. You know, and it's the dream, innit, to get paid to go fishing. Which Alan offered me. I did take it the first year, and then the second year I went, I don't deserve it. I do low stock fishing. I might not catch anything this year. It's not enough money to pay me bills. You know, I had decent money DJing at the time. It probably doesn't cover me petrol for the year. You know, for $5,000 a year, it's easy £100 a week in petrol to go fishing. Like, it doesn't really cover me travelling to the lake, so I'd rather not have any pressure put on my fishing, and feel obligated that I have to catch fish, or I've got to, you know, make an effort or go to Linear to get enough fish to do an article once. You know, I didn't want my fishing affected, but I was never motivated to make a living out of fishing or anything like that. You know, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Fishing was my hobby. I just got addicted to it. But, you know, Daryl has, and you know, he's one of the best anglers out there and has made a living from fishing. And so, you know, what might have happened if I'd have had 4 or 5 of the originals out of Yateley in 1 year? Like, maybe I'd have gone down a path that wasn't meant for me, you know.
I see what you say. I completely understand that. Yeah, it's sort of very open and sort of universal. Sort of, it will drag you where it will drag you. The reality of your style of angling, and I say this in a broad sense because Yateley is slightly different to Tatton to whatever, but this style of sort of target fishing, let's call it that as a blanket term. Highlights, brilliant catch pictures. We've overlaid some of them on the pod thus far, I'm sure. Amazing experiences, incredible highs, everything you could possibly want. You sort of linked it to the highest of possible highs. A lot of hard work, this journey element. The realities of that to everyday people, hence why not a lot of everyday people do it. There's a lot of sacrifice. Talk to me about personally where this is found things with yourself, because obviously these are significant chapters in life. You've had results on the back of most of them, but it ain't come without a lot of hardship, mate, has it?
No, there's hardship on different levels. So obviously, making those sacrifices. Again, I'm giving you the snapshots of the good bits. The things that go with that. Is being obsessive about certain things. Then sacrifices, have to be made. I could have secured my retirement up a lot more. I mean, I'm 50 years old now, and I had a very tough year after COVID, like super tough. I had 3 businesses that all revolved around people going to events or being able to travel abroad. I had a holiday company in another country. We had the Northern Angling Show, the fishing show. I mean, the venue disappeared during COVID, so that's knocked that on the head. All that comfortable state I was in, that I mentioned before, where I was free to do everything. I had 3 businesses, all sort of passive income, or performing myself musically, which didn't feel like work, because it's something you enjoy. Like all 3 of them went during COVID, and I had a great time during COVID because everyone was off. I did a lot of fishing with the Salado guy, James. We travelled all over Europe fishing. He had odd gigs in countries that were still open, like Croatia and stuff. So I would do a road trip, and we spent 6 months living in my van in the camper. We got on Cromwell for a bit. Obviously, that was short because it was a day ticket that was closed. So we were in a private fence community during COVID. We didn't have to even go shopping. Like his mum or whatever would go shopping for us, and it was just heaven. Like we fished for months and months and months on end. It was great. So at the time, COVID didn't really affect me because we'd just had a Northern Angling Show. We literally got it in just before everything shut down. Yeah. It shut down the week after the show, so I'd had a year's wages basically the week before, so life was good. I had all this time. My friends had loads of time. Nobody had any pressure. You've got to be somewhere or you've got to go to work. Everybody was off work. Events were short, so he was off work for over a year. I had money, and it was like, oh, this is great.
This is all right.
This is good. When it hit me was after COVID, so everything's gone back to normal. People have gone back to their own lives. I've still got no venue. The holiday company's gone. It took a while for my sort of. I'd stopped doing my own gigs at that point. I'd been doing a few in Slovenia, Croatia before it shut, but it was another 2 years. They actually only got back going again last year, though. So basically, my world fell apart. I was in a very, very dark state. While I've had some highs, and it might be easy for people watching this to think, bloody hell, he's living a happy old life. It does come with sacrifice, and I was in a very, very, very dark place last year. A couple of my friends rescued me, basically, the Salado guy and Roger. They turned up at my house. I'd cut myself off from the world. I wasn't speaking to anybody. I was avoiding calls, phone calls, everything. I was planning suicide 100 times a day. It was consumed my head. I was like, I'm 50 years old. I've lost all my work. I've had a good life. I wasn't wanting to bow out of life because, I was all miserable and sad. It was like, if life's going to be shit from now on, I've had a really good life. Like, I don't want to
fade away.
No. How can I do it right without hurting my daughter or my family or whatever? And my brain wasn't thinking straight. I was angry at the world, really, really angry at the world, and most of it's been my own choices. I've chose a life that's not very stable, you know, and they're the sacrifices you make from being obsessive about a certain thing. You know, everybody's read Terry's first book, and you know he was living on the bank with no money and taking handouts of food from people on Yateley and stuff. Like a lot, you know, it annoys me when people get envious or jealous of, oh well, he gets free bait, he catches these fish, or he goes there, or he's full time, or he can do what he wants. Like they're the snapshots of the good side of it. You know, the results at the end of it. If you're not prepared to not have any money, to not be able to pay your mortgage, to be so obsessive that you will not go to work because the conditions are perfect to catch that big fish, you probably ain't going to catch that big fish. You know, you can't have both sides of it. You can't have the glory of being the best guitar player in the world without having practiced 12 hours a day for 10 years, putting everything else in your life off. You can't do both. You can't be the best athlete in the world. You can't be a really obsessive angler that catches a big fish without making those sacrifices. And I found the downside of those sacrifices last year. If I didn't have kids, I wouldn't be here now. 100%. You know, that's what stopped me. I was planning, if I go to another country and take a drugs overdose, it won't look like I've killed myself. I was laying all my documents out, you know, life insurance and everything else, thinking, right, I want to make sure everything gets found if I'm not here anymore. And Roger and James, they turned up at my house and dragged me to Ibiza. I've got 2 tickets for you to go to Ibiza. We're taking you away. Like, it's not good. Yeah. They knew the state I was in. And then straight after that, as soon as we got back, they paid for a week on Grenville for me as well, paid for everything, the bait, like, just kept me out of it. It saved my life, probably. Yeah. Because I mean, I was researching it and all, researching different ways to just bow out quietly. And it actually scared me a bit. So more than 50% of suicides are spur of the moment. So I was definitely in a frame of mind where I could have done that spur of the moment, just that opportunity. There's a train, bang, I'm in front of it. You know, I was in that sad state of mind, and I've only felt not that bad, but I felt that down once before in my life, and that's what I told you about before when I was in Slovenia, and I'd split up with a long-term relationship. I was on my own in another country. My dog had died, my uncle died, who was responsible for the music career, and I was not as low as I was last year, but it was tough. And I think the only reason I realised it then was my mum rang me up one day and she was like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, fine. You know, I'm going through the motions. I'm doing my work. I'm doing this." She was like, "Well, you shouldn't be. Like, everything that's happened to you shouldn't be all right." And it made me go, "Oh yeah." And then I sorted myself out. Like, yeah, I did the normal stuff that pulls you around when you're getting depressed or whatever. You do your exercise, you eat clean. I ended up going travelling, meeting some beautiful people abroad. You know, I've been going to Indonesia quite a lot since then. You know, every winter up until COVID. Like that reset me. It definitely completely reset me. Whereas this time after COVID, when everything hit me, I don't know, it's totally different. I was definitely in a darker place. And like I said, I was super angry at the world. And don't get me wrong, things are not perfect now. Still, I've still got, long-term issues. No problems have been fixed. I had a poker win in November, which was another big one, which took the pressure off short term. I was very happy to win a trophy in my hometown and all that. But the long-term problems haven't gone, but the anger at the world's gone. But even last year, knowing what you need to do to pull yourself out of that dark place, like eating clean and exercising and, you know, trying to sort yourself out naturally, it wasn't working. And it's I don't know, like it makes you not want to go fishing. Like you just don't want to do anything. You lose the motivation for anything and everything. And it's highs and lows, and everything's always worked out. You know, everybody I've ever spoke to, they've always said when things go bad, like it always gets better, and it usually does. I know that. I've chose this way of life. I've chose to be able to have the freedom to go fishing, to the freedom to travel, for the freedom to not have to get up at 8 o'clock every morning and be told what to do all day. I've chose that, and I know the sacrifice of that comes is a bit less stability. And I've been on my arse quite a few times in my life. Especially in the DJ world, you flavour of the month. You 4 or 5 nights a week.
Okay, yes.
And then you get complacent. You've been at that residency for 4 years, and they decide to freshen it up, as they probably should do. I'd have sacked me, I got my feet under the table. I'm putting mixes on to go meet girls out the back. Do you know what I mean? You just get complacent, and you deserve to be shook up. But every time that happens, you go from being flavoured a month to on your ass. In no time. So that's happened enough times to me in my life to know you've been attacked.
Double teamed it, kids.
That's happened to me enough times in my life to know that, it always works out and something pulls around. But something was different last year. There was something, that belief that, and it's, don't know if it's because I hit 50 and all of a sudden I've not got, I'm running out of time to actually secure up the future. And I mean, it's a random thing, COVID, who could have predicted that? I had 3 businesses that gave me a comfortable life and lots of time, and all of them stopped at the same time. I mean, you could not have predicted that. Do I wish I'd been a bit more sensible? But then I wouldn't have had the life that I've had. I wouldn't have caught the fish that I've caught. Wouldn't have had the time to do the things that I've done. So I don't know what the answer is to that. Maybe there's a happy medium, but I don't think you can be obsessive and driven to get really, I did the 8 hours a day guitar playing, for 15 years of my youth and became very good. I was at the Guitar Institute in London, age 17. I passed my driving test in 10 weeks specifically so I could go fishing and go to the Guitar Institute because I was obsessive. I don't think you can be that obsessive and super sensible and risk averse and all the other things at the same time. Like, can you be both?
And I think everything you've done has been your way, your decisions, your path. But I think the most important thing is that, well, not only that you're obviously well and everything is in a better light now, shall we say. I know it's a continued process, but also that you've been sort of brave enough to chat about it, because I guarantee there'll be people who are in a similar situation. I think there's a lot in life. There's at different stages. There's different, and it might be not chronological age. It might be whatever it might be. But for some people, they're going to feel a sort of a similar way, mate. And I think the more people share experiences and sort of normalise that thought process and how people feel, then. But I didn't realise, when you look at the face of it, like you say, you see great poker wins, a really successful Northern Angling show, incredible fishing career, like a very talented, educated man with loads going for him. You don't necessarily link the two together with regards to that. I certainly didn't when we talked about it. But yeah, mate, it's credit to you that you sort of have been able to deal with that and sort of shed a bit more light on things positively, I think.
I think mental health is something, especially men, because suicides are way higher in men than anybody. I mean, I've looked into a lot of this now over the last 12 months. There's a lot of people going to be in my boat. There's people that may have chose a stable life, a way less risky one than mine, that have still had the rug pulled from under them because of COVID and whatever. They might have lost a business that they thought they had for life or whatever. So I think men, especially, being able to talk about mental health and being open about it is important.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm welling up a bit.
Nah, mate, don't be silly. It's really heavy stuff, and I'm massively appreciative for you to sharing it, because it will help somebody out there 100%. There'll be people in the same boat who you need to talk about it. You need to share experiences, and you need places to sort of, to feel safe. I don't know. It's part of the process, I'd imagine. Like, it's a brave thing to do, mate. Like, I couldn't empathise with it, but I know mates who've been through it and who've been in similar positions. But yeah, mate, more credit to you, because you're there, you've been through it, it's been hard, and you've managed to come back from a point which some people, unfortunately, don't.
Yeah, I'm not out the woods yet, no. But things are a bit better. Having that win in November really sort of took the pressure off, but it hasn't changed the long term stuff. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of people going to be in the same boat. Suicides are higher in men than anybody else, and I think there's at that age 30 to 50 as well, and a lot of the angling demographic. And the thing is, you don't want to talk about it like I'm an intelligent guy that's thought a lot about my options. You know, I've worked it all, planned it all out, and I didn't want any of them. That was the thing, that I wasn't sad that like, oh, my life's so shit, I want to end it. It was like, my life's been so good, I don't want a shit one. You know, like if this is the end of it, if I've got nothing to offer the world anymore, like I'm quite happy to say goodbye. You know, if I didn't have people that would have been upset, then I'd almost certainly have done it. But I went fishing with Mark when I was at one of the lowest points, Mark Watson, and we went to the lake that he fishes a lot, Apex, and you know, we were talking about it, and he didn't realise I was in such a bad place. And by the time I explained my thought process to him, he was like, "There's nothing I can say against that. You're right." You know, like I understand why you feel how you feel. You know, and it wasn't sympathy or anything like that, or like, oh, woe is me. It was kind of the opposite. It was like, I've had such a really good life, you know, of my own choosing. I don't really want to settle for something that's you know, I'm going to be old and poor and not able to look after myself, or you know, I was like, it's been so good that I don't want to have a crap one, and I don't see what me ways out are. You know, other than getting a job in McDonald's or some, you know, things that I'm not going to do. Like I'd rather just sign off now, a happy thing. And the problem is everybody I spoke to, you know, people that I did speak to at the time, and I didn't want to speak to many people. I was ignoring the phone and you know, actively avoiding everybody. Like I said, it took Roger knocking at my front door. You know, was driven an hour to come and drag me out of it, you know, and that did cure the anger at the world. That couple of weeks they took me away, but I just didn't want to go through and explain it again to somebody else because, you know, I've thought about all the options. It wasn't like I wasn't thinking straight. It was, I've explored what the options are, and nobody's got a solution. There isn't one, and I'm doing the exercise, and I'm doing all, you know, getting out in the fresh air and all the things that normally work, like, and none of it was. And my brain was in a different place. You know, that was, I mean, there's a few people, I wouldn't be in the position I was in last year if everybody else had been as honourable as, say, I am. I've probably been ripped off for 60 grand in the last 3 years, you know, and I wanted to kill people, you know. I was like waiting outside one guy's house that owed me 1,500 quid, and it's like, it's minor compared to, you know, other people that have took the mickey, and, you know, I'd have probably gone to jail for hurting him. And I'm not that guy, you know. Not a violent, angry guy. I've had a fight since I was at school, you know what I mean, 35 years ago or something. Like, I'm not that guy, but I would have done something daft if he'd have come out of his house that day. Just anger, and I think in hindsight, a lot of it, I've only got myself to blame. You know, I have chose this life.
I think there's more chapters, mate, in this life. I think it's hard. I mean, I'm looking at it from the outside in. I feel there's plenty more to give. I don't know the ins and outs of whatever you like, but in terms of forwards, there's still a lot, mate, isn't there? Like, you know what I mean? I know that there's sort of maybe the security element of a nice lifestyle, but you've never done it that way, mate, and there's still things you can do and have a great rest of your life. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I hope so. I've got a new baby now as well. He's got a 9-month-old little boy, so you know, completely unplanned. Didn't want that at 50, you know. You know, with somebody I wasn't together with, so you know, that might have contributed to everything as well last year. But I've never been motivated by money, like, for anything. So that's not what the problem was. Obviously, if you're really struggling, and you know, then it becomes an issue. But you know, above being able to pay your bills, I've never done anything for money my whole life. And you know, maybe I should have done. Maybe should have thought about it a little bit more. And you know, I've always been bright enough to be able to earn money. You know, when I've needed to get. You know, as I said before, I've started businesses that were probably daft at the time, but just because it's something I wanted to tick off, you know, something I wanted to do.
Mate, it's experience, isn't it? Like, a lot of people regret what they don't do. What do they say? You regret what you don't do, not what you do, mate. And you've had a broad spectrum across absolutely everything, and you're still continuing to do it now, mate. There'll be other chapters, there'll be a lot more, and you've got people that obviously really, really obviously care about you, want you here, and you've got a legacy with the little man and sort of the daughter and everything, mate. So there's a lot, mate. There's a hell of a lot.
Yeah, I can't wait to take him fishing once he's a little bit older. I hope he likes it. So they say 1 in 3 children, male or female, will take to fishing if they're exposed to it. So yeah, I hope he enjoys it. I mean, I used to take Megan, my daughter. I mean, she's 22 now. I used to take her when she was young, but it scarred her for life. She won't come. She won't come now.
Well, I have to take mine for like short stints. They love it at the moment, but I'm hoping that continues forever. So I'm being very delicate, mate. But yeah, that'll be brilliant. On to a different slant, but something just as positive, mate. You're fishing in Europe. You talked about it there. You talked about obviously this holiday business and then whatever. But your experiences out fishing the likes of sort of Bear Lake, etc. Your European angling did that. There's a lot of trend that you see nowadays with sort of UK anglers going over and sampling that European sort of lifestyle. You talked about Ollie and the influence of Euro banks, but for you, the fishing out there, like, talk to me about that. Was it everything you desired? Was it all sort of, I don't know, the sort of mega nature that everybody sort of hypes it up to be?
Yeah,
Job done.
It made English fishing seem like the rat race that it is now. I'm not against English fishing at all. I've got a Grenville ticket starting in June, and that is a piece of carp fishing heaven. You know, it's not too busy. It's got big fish in. It's very, very well run. It ticks all the boxes. But apart from that, you know, I've not had a syndicate for a few years before that, and I thought I'd probably never fish in England again because, you know, when you do go fishing, you're on a day ticket or a linear or somewhere like that, and it is a complete rat race. It's not enjoyable. It's quite expensive, you know, your bluebells and the linears and stuff. And when you go abroad, Slovenia, Croatia, they're stunning, they're beautiful. You know you're going to catch fish every time you go. Like it's a different set of skills. It's how do I catch the bigger ones, not how do I catch. You know, I've watched the locals catch 3 to 5 fish in a day, and they're all like the smaller bracket. You know, they're like 20s to the late 30s, and they'll go home because they're not on the big fish. You know, it's like, you know, you don't expect not to catch. When you go, it's totally different to English fishing, and it's enjoyable. So, you know, going back to the kids, if you took a kid fishing over there for the first time, you could easily take them carp fishing in England 6 times, and their first 6 experiences are wet, miserable, horrible, and no fish. You know, that's not the case over there. You're way more likely to fall in love with something when you get that adrenaline of catching a fish or whatever, and it's just a different mentality. I think everything else that goes with it, from the weather to, you know, it's quite hard to eat junk food in most of Europe. You know, they've got different laws with advertising. You know, there's more McDonald's in Manchester than there is in the entire country of Slovenia and Croatia put together.
Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's 5 McDonald's in Slovenia. They're in a couple of the cities in Croatia. But, you know, in England, you've got to walk past 10 junk food places to eat clean. Like, it's hard to find junk food over there. Like, and, you know, everything's natural. It's not, you know, supermarket processed like ours is, injected with steroids to grow quick. You know, when you eat the eggs, you can see it, chicken breasts, everything. You know, when I moved over there with that girlfriend a few years back, she was clucking for KFC. See what I did there?
Nice.
And so we asked Gashper. Most people know Gashper now. Obviously, he's a Nash guy, and he is Mr. Bled and Mr. Carp Fish in Europe. Like, he's like, I know a place I can take you to, and he has to call. It looks like a house. It's like a little bar inside a house. It looks like a house when you go to. The chickens are running about in the back. You have to ring an hour before you go and book a slot. They kill the chicken, cut the head off it, cut it. The entire chicken, they cut it into like 6 pieces or whatever, breadcrumb it and fry it, and that's all they serve is this fresh fried chicken with chips. It's the only thing you can buy in this place. It's incredible, and the taste, it's just natural.
That's not KFC, mate. That's gourmet.
It's incredible, but you get every tiny little bit of that chicken, apart from the head, you know, like battered in bread. It's things things we like. I ended up not seeing any bricks like my street here. It's an all right road, but you know, it's the old St Anne's brick. It's called. It's like a red brick that all the houses are. And I remember I'd been in Slovenia, Croatia for 3 years, and I was either in forests, the beach, or by a lake. And then I went to Indonesia for 2 winters, which is just jungle and beach and sea. And I remember after 4 years coming back here and driving up the road, and I felt like I was in a concrete prison, like just driving up my road here, which is an all right road. But I was just like, we're so used to this in England. Then when you go abroad, you go fishing or whatever, and it's not a rat race. You're catching fish. The weather's nice. You know, it's a lot more relaxed. You're not eating crap. Like, it just thinks we're so acclimatized to England. We think it's normal, and it's not normal for the rest of the world. Like the way we live, it's not. You know, and the only reason I've been back in England is because, you know, that COVID situation and you know, I lost all my work abroad. I had to come back here. And now obviously I've had a child here, so I'm probably stuck here for the foreseeable future unless I can kidnap it. So, you know, I'm getting used to it again. But one of my friends who used to speak about on the Carp Cast quite a lot, my mate Dave, he's just been in, his dad's got a little finca up in Tenerife, like up in the mountains, and he's just been there. He's had a hard couple of years. He's split with his missus, and she's left him with the kids, so he's took them away for the first time in a couple of years. And as he got back to England, he said, I drove in Blackpool, I drove up this road, and he said there was a load of kids all balaclavaed up, and they were causing trouble here, and they were making a mess there, and then I saw this happen. All in the space of 10 minutes when he got back to Blackpool, he saw 4 different things. And he was just like, what on earth am I doing in England? Yeah, because until he'd been away, all this stuff was kind of normal, you know, just tolerating it and putting up with it. And I don't think we're so used to the way our country is until you take yourself out of it, which is most of the world, by the way. It's not like the way we live. They call I spoke about this on the Carp Cast a little bit, but most surveys and demographics are done on what's called the weird demographic of people, which is the Western, educated, industrialised, rich demographic. I think they call it weird.
Right.
We make up 20% of the world. 80% of the world does not live like us.
No.
You know, but we think the way we do it is normal. Everyone's way happier abroad.
There's loads of big carp, mega fishing. You can put as much bait in as you like. You catch them all the time. You can't get any better. One element of that fishing that I've seen, though, and probably an element I wanted to speak to you about before I talk rigs and things like that with you, because I'm interested in that, but is distance. There's a lot of those lakes seem to be sort of respond to real positive baiting, consistent baiting, but also range fishing, mate. How much range fishing is realistically out there? Is it the further you can cast, the more you can catch?
I think the Croatia lakes are a little bit like that, but it's only because they have matches on there. And
right.
The thing is, like, most English lakes are quite small, so people don't have to cast. What I've learned from having a holiday company abroad is that most English people can't cast. Like on Bear Lake, most of it's short range, 10 wraps, 12 wraps, 7 wraps.
Yeah, perfect.
Right? There's a couple of swims that are like 15, 16 wraps. The amount of customers we had that couldn't cast 16 wraps was mind-blowing. Yeah, it surprised me. Really, really surprised me.
I was talking like 28 wraps, 30 wraps, 15, 16.
Right, so there's kids, and I've seen an 80-year-old guy pick up Gasper's rod on this lake called Ontario in Croatia, near Zagreb, and first cast with Gasper's rod, and Gasper's a good caster. He put this, I don't know, it must have been 180 yards.
Shut up.
Easily. First go on somebody else's rods, and it was tiny, this guy. He was 80 and tiny. He used to be in the Croatia match team years ago. So over there, the match fishing's pretty big, but they're used to casting. The thing is, we're not. So we've never had to learn to do it. So it's pretty normal over there. I mean, I'm a reasonable caster, but compared to like the Austrians, basically everyone can cast in Europe apart from us. But fish are fish, so they go to where the food is. So I remember when I got a ticket on Elstow 1, there was a swim called the Reeds, And part of the reeds was roped off, so you couldn't cast too far into the back of this like reedy bay. So what happened was, where it was roped off, that line was the hotspot, so you'd put the bait there. Anyway, the second year they actually moved the line like halfway up the bay, so it was a good 10 yards shorter than the previous hotspot. That became the hotspot because that's where the food's going. So I think on a lake where you can cast long, if you can feed further away than, 10 yards further, you're probably going to catch more than the guys either side of you. If everybody fished at 70 yards, the fish would be at 70 yards.
Yeah.
So it's just a case of the lakes are bigger. If nobody tried to cast 160 yards, then the fish would come to where the food is. It's that simple.
Stop casting, you Europeans. Biggest sort of significant captions you've had out in Europe? You've had loads, I know, mate. But what sort of resonates with you?
One that sticks out, I had a really good day on Lake Bled. So it was after I'd been there a couple of years. We had some customers coming over. There's a lad called Joe Jagger. You might know he was with Nash quite a few years ago. He was over on his own. And then there was a couple of guys, two brothers that come fairly regular. I wasn't going to fish, and there's this one particular swim. So everyone will have seen Gashper's pictures with the church in the background. So that's just to the left of where I'm talking about. Anyway, there's the closest swim to the island. It's like a little peninsula point sort of thing. Anyway, I've never been able to get in that swim, and I've walked around there with the customers. The fish were definitely all along this area, from Gashper's area up to this point, and they've all chosen their swims, and this swim on the point's still empty. And I was like, I wasn't going to fish. I had the dogs with me, and I was just like, oh, go on then, I might as well buy a ticket. That was in the days before they limited it to 10 tickets a day like it is now. And so I thought, I'll just fish a day. I've never had a chance to go on this anyway. I ended up having 7 fish in a day, which is, it's a reasonable amount on there. I've seen people catch more, but it's a decent amount. But they were all big ones, every one of them. Anyway, I ended up, I think I've got a little video of it. I'll see if I can get you a clip of it. But I think Joe Jagger took it, actually. It was one of the big commons. It was 59, I think he was at the time. But I've got on the video, I've got the church, the bells ringing in the background as I'm landing it, and Joe's like, oh, it's a big common. And then this big fat thing rolled over the net. That was a pretty nice day. I ended up fishing it. I couldn't fish all the next day because I think we had customers on Bear Lake as well at the time. I had to go and get in the afternoon, but it was fishing so well that it was worth spending 50 quid on a ticket just to fish a few hours the next morning. I think I had another 2 or 3 or whatever, but they're all good ones. I think the biggest highlight. So that other year where I was feeling pretty low, it was back end of the year, and it was just before I went travelling, when my mum had said to me, like, you shouldn't be all right. It was the only year in my life I've ever had the opportunity to go fishing at Christmas for a period of time. So there's this lake in Croatia called Zajaki. It's got a few 90-pounders in it, but it's very, very big fish. And watching Steve Briggs from when I was a kid fishing Lake Hassan on Christmas Day with his Christmas hats on and his picture of the fish, I've always wanted to do that, whether it be casting or whatever. And I actually thought, trying to turn a negative into a positive this year, where I had no partners, I'm in another country. I was like, this is my year to do it. These lakes fish well, like Cassin always did in the winter. There was a chance of catching. You won't, if you go and do a month's fishing in England in winter, you're probably wasting your time. Whereas this lake in Croatia, like the water was still warm. It was still 12 to 14 degrees every day. So I fished the whole of December up to New Year's Day on Zajaki. I fished on my own for most of it. I was catching pretty well. I think Roger came down the first week. It was like last week in November or something. He fished for a week, and then I just carried on. It was -5 day and night. Temperature didn't change, but it was dry. It wasn't damp. It wasn't horrible. As long as you had your warm clothes, and obviously I had indulgence. 5-season jobby. You're never cold in one of them, no matter what the temperature is outside. And it was really comfortable. There's a few things you have to be aware of. So the nets were sticking to the ground. Like if you had a run in the evening, like you couldn't pick the net up, it was frozen solid. So you had to leave the nets in the water. But the water was actually warm. Like I said, it was between 12. It was 12 by the end of the month, but it was 14 degrees when I started. It's had 35 degrees on it for the previous 4 or 5 months, and it's crazy. It's an average of 15 to 18 foot. So the water was still warm. The fishing was great. Anyway, a couple of my Slovenian friends, Gaspar and this other guy, Frank, they came for Christmas week. I think Gaspar came Boxing Day or something. And but Frank was there on Christmas Day, and this other lad, Aliash, and I wanted to catch that Christmas Day carp with the hat on, the Briggsy picture. Yeah. That's all I wanted to do, and I've been catching 4 or 5 fish a day. I'd had like 760s like in the previous week, but they're all 40 plus in there, like every fish. I had one day, not that day, but in the summer, there's one day I had 18 fish. I didn't get any of them out the water to weigh them, because they were not big for there. Anyway, halfway through the day, I thought I might as well weigh one of them just to get a ballpark of what this group of fish is. Anyway, the one that I weighed was 42 pound. So they were all between 18 and 45. Every one of them. Didn't get no intention of getting any of them out for a picture like that. That's the average stamp of fish in this lake. I put 50s back in the middle of the night without photographing them.
Just another 50.
Yeah, it's just normal from there. If the fish have been in that lake more than 2 years, they're all over £40. They stock them at 20s and they're 40 within 2 years. So you're on the new fish if you catch a 40 pounder. It's they reckon there's 10 90 pluses and the biggest is 102.
10 90 pluses.
Yeah, in that lake. It's incredible. So 50s are nothing in there. Anyway, so I'm doing this session. Christmas Day, I've had 5 fish every night between 5 and midnight. Every single day the bites were at the same time. It's on Christmas Day, the day that I want to catch one. I've got 2 or 3 of my mates there, and I've not had a bite. And I was like, hey, what's going on? Anyway, 1 o'clock in the morning, I get a take. And then Ali Ash, for some reason, has got his phone out and started videoing it. And he says on the video, I've actually not got this video. I've never got it off him, but I don't even know if I've still got it because it's a few years ago. But he actually said on the video, this is your PB, this. And I don't know why he said it. Anyway, it was £73 on Christmas Day at 1 o'clock in the morning.
That's a belter, man.
So I've got the pictures. So I've obviously got all my friends around me, Christmas hats on, at a time that, quite a low point in my career. And again, I wanted that Christmas Day fish. I fished there for a month, and to catch me biggest ever fish on Christmas Day, was that an accident? Why did it come that day and not all the other days?
The power of the mind, mate. You've put it out there, haven't you, mate, to the universe?
Yes. Yeah, so that's probably my highlight of me European fishing, just because that was the dream. That was why I was there. It was Briggsy's pictures from Hassan back in the day. Crazy. And probably the only time in my life I'll ever actually have that freedom, even though it was because it was quite a bad time in my life, to have that freedom to be able to just go fishing for a month at Christmas.
Well, you were owed it, the Carp Gods, mate. You were owed it, a big £76. Rigs, mate, talk to me here. I've listened to thousands of hours, not that there has been, maybe hundreds of hours of Carp Cast. The rig ones I used to love, mate, whoever you were talking with Mark, whether you were talking with Nash and various other people that have been on the show. But it always stakes interest in carp anglers, regardless of sort of location being the most paramount thing and whatever else. Rig-wise, you mentioned it a lot earlier in the podcast, you went to your rig. You couldn't be bothered to, so you put a choddy out, but normally you'd have put your rig on a clean bottom. You've obviously had a lot of experience. You've caught a lot of mega fish. Talk to me about the constitution of this rig, or what you feel is your most effective.
I've always been into bottom baits and not pop-ups. In recent years, the Ronnie rig, spinner rig, whatever you want to call it, like it's got me into using pop-ups because it's just so effective. Not sure I'd allow it on my lake if I owned a lake,
What is that?
They double hook a lot. They're almost too good. I'm reasonably competent angler, know what I'm doing, and I've had hook holds where I'm thinking, if I was a novice trying to take this hook out, I'm going to damage the fish. So for that reason alone, but prior to the Ronnie becoming popular. I always used a blowback rig and then the slip D rig. The first time I saw the slip D, I was like, this is my rig. So every rig, though, to me is slightly different depending on the situation. So I don't have one rig I use everywhere. I have a standard rig that I'll use, normally a bottom bait or a snowman or a critically balanced. So I always used to drill my boilers and put the foam in the inside or the cork or whatever. Critically balancing the rig is the most underrated edge I think any angler can have other than a super sharp hook. But just balancing your bait so it sinks so slowly it looks like it's floating, but
so you have them that critically balanced?
Yeah, really, really, really fine. The more time you spend on it, and the best anglers I know are all exactly the same with that. I don't know what it is. Because I've used bottom baits as well for quite a lot of my fishing career, and on lakes where people are swearing by fishing the Terriern style hinge rig, where they're using a blatant pop up 3 inches above the ground, and I've used bottom baits, and with an angler as competent as me, and we've had the same results through the autumn. On the lake we might have had 20 fish each, and fishing totally different, but the fish I'll catch will be different to the 20 fish he caught. I might have repeated one of them 3 times, and he might have repeated 1 3 times, but neither of us have caught
what the
other one caught. Yeah. So I think fish feed differently. If I was going onto a lake trying to catch, the top 6 fish, the A-team or whatever, I'd probably have a different rig on each rod, because fish feed differently, and some rigs suit the way certain fish feed. Some, you might need a longer hook length for some fish because they suck from further away. You might need, some fish might just go around hoovering, really tight, and in which case I think like a hinge stiff rig type rig works really well for those sort of fish. Fish with overslung mouths, like Angry had an overslung mouth. There was a fish called Paddle, like a big common that lived in the Woolpack. It was one of the early 50s in Cambridgeshire. We were speaking about that off camera before, weren't we? About how certain counties always seem to grow fish to a similar sort of size, and they're quite often capped. But Cambridgeshire had 50-pound commons in long before, it was one of the first counties in the country that I knew had 50-pounders, I think. Out of anywhere in the country.
And to be fair, you've got an interesting thought on this as well, isn't it? In that and we've said it before on this podcast about the differentiation between north and south, but the records with regards to weight, fish find their limits, and you reckon that the limits are different county to county because of substrate.
I'm sure it's the nutrients in the ground, yeah. So, Cambridgeshire did 50-pounders a long, long time ago, well over 20 years ago. I think when the Fat Lady first went 50-pound in St. Ives, and it also had a couple of other 50s in the area. The Woolpack had a 50 at the time. The fish it's still always grown fish to that sort of size. I lost my train of thought a little bit. I had it explained a little bit better in my head just then, and it went. But the Colne Valley always grew fish bigger than everywhere else. It still does. If one dies, another one replaces it. They always get to the same sort of weights. There's certain counties that the biggest fish now is even though bait's got better, we use a lot more of it, the bait's higher quality than it used to be 25, 30 years ago. The fish have still kind of capped at the same size. And so if it's not volume of bait, volume of anglers, strain of fish, then the only thing it can be is the substrate. So, certain areas, when I looked into Cambridgeshire years ago, Cambridgeshire is made up of peat bogs, which used to grow stuff like back in the day. I forget what it was now, but I've got documents on my computer from same thing when I started fishing Shropshire and looking at glacial meres, how they're formed from the Ice Age with the rocks coming down the mountains and then creating these big craters. That's why they always end up silty with no gravel or anything like that in there, just sometimes little piles of rocks that have been pulled down the mountain with it. Like, there seems to be a cap of each area. The Shropshire record's never got any bigger in the last 25 years.
You reference that off camera. It's true, isn't it, when you look?
Yeah, and, Cambridgeshire's always grown 50-pounders from 25 years ago to now, and they're not really, the Cambridgeshire record, other than Grenville, which is unique, it's the perfect carp water, but it's not done a 60-pounder anywhere else. I mean, at 60-pound 1 ounce, the Fat Lady went just before it died. But but it's grown a lot of mid-50s, Cambridgeshire, from 25 years ago to now. Cheshire has always grown bigger than, even though Cheshire's in the north, I think there's something about the ground. I mean, Cheshire had 30-pounders in the 80s when the Colne Valley had 30-pounders in the 80s. Cheshire now, obviously, we know has done fish to near 60. The Tatton Park fish went up at 50. I've heard of a couple of others in Cheshire that I can't mention as well.
You won't say anything about that.
I won't say. There's a club ticket that's got some very big 50s in the sort of Cheshire area. I think it's the ground, the substrate.
It's interesting. That. Sorry, Matt, I distracted you from rigs. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, no, it's all the same. So yeah, so my rigs, I've always used critically balanced, and I've always liked Snowmans, but the rig will vary depending on the bottom and what I'm fishing over, or the situation, how I'm feeding. If I'm feeding hemp and pellet, like lots of small stuff, I think the fish are hoovering. If I'm fishing, that kind of scattered boilie approach with a throwing stick or whatever, which I think, spread baiting type thing, which I think is also a very, very effective way of fishing, then I'll use a different type of rig for that. So every rig is not versatile. It's
situational, sort of.
It's situational, yeah. So I'll use a longer hook link, a shorter hook link. I'll pop it up further off the bottom. I'll critically balance it more. But my go-to rig on a clean bottom is always a slip D with a Snowman, critically balanced. I want it falling down really, really slowly. And that's I've had nearly all my big fish like that.
You love a little stick as well, didn't you?
Yeah, not so much in more recent years. Right. Only because I've been using pop-ups a little bit more, and I've been using like a Ronnie spinner type setup, and it's just heavy. It just never tangles. But the stick came in when I did quite a lot of boat fishing. I was fishing Fen Drayton, Farfen. I fished a few lakes, one after the other, with boats where everything's perfect. So you're hand placing the rig, you can see it, you're laying it on one side of the spot, you're making a trailer bait all the way up to it, you can actually back lead in the weed, so there's no line on the... Like, everything was so perfect every single time. Once I fished lakes where you had to cast again, my head was battered with like, is it landing perfectly? Is it tangled? Is it this? Is it that? I'd got so used to it being perfect that I started messing with my brain. And I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine I met on Colmere years ago called Alex Perrin, and we were discussing the perfect rig presentation. And we were always saying, like, if you could actually lay your rig down so that the hook link was in a semicircle, meaning if a fish came from any angle, like, it had slack. So, I don't like a rig. Let's say your rig's stretched out like 6 inches.
Yeah.
And, I'm doing it vertically instead of on the bottom for the camera. But the rig's 6 inches and the hook link's, sorry, I'm talking into the mic. You're right, mate. The hook link's fully extended. Yeah. And then a fish comes from here and it sucks from here. How on earth is that bait going to go into its mouth? Because it's already extended. So if the hook link was in a circle and the fish comes from any angle, it's got 3 or 4 inches it can move. Anyway, I was always like, well, other than dropping from a boat, how on earth do you make a rig like that? Anyway, so I started using sticks purely for the anti-tangle properties. Like, I always knew it could land on anything and it'd be fishing, and it was never tangled. 0% of the time was it tangled. Anyway, I ended up doing a test. I forget which lake it was on, but it was a lake where I could cast to the far margin and walk around and look at it. Anyway, I suddenly realised that sinking a stick on a tight line, the stick falls backwards on itself, and when the stick melts, you've got that semicircle that I'd been trying to work out. How on earth could you recreate that? I was already doing it like by accident with the stick. So when you land a stick on a tight line, the amount of anglers I see that don't hit the clip just above the water, or they hit it too early, or it goes in the slack line, they reel it in the morning, the rig's tangled. Like, if you don't hit the clip right, it's a good chance your rig's tangled. Like, so many people just don't get that. Good anglers I've seen fishing and they don't use the clip, and people that catch, but they've obviously worked out a rig or a way that suits how they cast, if you know what I mean. But most good anglers that I see, it's all about the clip and all about the bump as it hits the ground. But so I was using a stick for that, and it actually solved the other problem that I was trying to do. So I've actually got out of use of using the sticks since I've started fishing abroad a lot more. So abroad, you just can't tie up sticks for every cast because you might be catching 10 fish a day. I'm using the same hook 3 sessions in a row. Some of my hooks have had 30 fish on them. I use a sharpener every time now. I take a file, but I learned a different style of fishing over there because you're catching more fish and regularly. You can't be as, fishing, say, the Woolpack or some of these low stock syndicates I've fished in England, you're casting once a day. Sometimes you might leave it out 2 days if you cast it perfectly. In a 3-night session, you might cast twice, right? You can make sure everything's perfect. You can tie your sticks. You can have a load of casts because you're leaving it there. Abroad, it might only be out 20 minutes, so you can't spend an hour getting everything perfect for it to be out 20 minutes and then do that again and do that again. You need...
It's not practical, is it?
No, so you have a little table by your rods. On that table, you've got sharpeners, different colour pop-ups. So that's the other thing I've learned about fishing abroad is we don't pay attention to colours enough. So when you're catching 10 fish a day, some in the morning, you'll find that a colour that works in the morning doesn't work in the afternoon. Now, we would never know that in England. We're using the same colour bait. So Rob Hughes actually did an underwater test. So it's to do with light levels. Different colours look brighter in different light levels. So a colour that's really pronounced at a certain point of the day and a different point of the day is not really pronounced. So I might be getting all my bites on white pop-ups and then the bites will dry up. So over there, because you should be getting bites every hour or every half an hour, whatever, you'll change the colour. You'll put a different colour on, a red one, and it will go straight away.
What you found? What colours have you found? You've done a specific colour?
The usual is white, yellows, reds, but different ones work at different points of the day. So it's been a couple of years since I've actually done any serious fishing over there. So, but basically, all the locals, they'll have 10 different types of pop-ups by the rods. They'll have a hook sharpener because you need to put the same rig out again and again if you can, because you're catching too many fish to have a new rig every fish like you would in England. There was a time in England where I was hardcore serious fishing, the serious big fish lakes. I'd never cast a rig out twice. If it didn't land right, it normally got a new rig,
that's proper, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of the top anglers have said, Darryl Peck's same thing, like rarely cast a hook out twice. He was obsessed about, the sharpness of the hooks. But over there, like I said, it's different sets of circumstances. So you'll find that, something you've been catching on for hours, it stopped working. Now in England, you just think the fish aren't there. But if you change something there, you get a bite again straight away. Maybe you've just popped up off the lead, or maybe you put a white pop-up on instead of a yellow one, and all of a sudden you got a bite. The fish were there, so why the bite stopped? Then you change something and bang, you're catching again. But we don't catch enough fish in England to ever do that.
To do that, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? A lot of different thoughts. For you, we talked about it a little bit. The future for you, you got a Grenville ticket coming on board. You've got the Northern Carp Show next year happening.
Don't know. We haven't got a venue at the minute. So obviously, we lost Event City. They closed down during COVID and didn't build another one, which they were intended on doing. And I think a fishing show in Manchester is probably finished for now. We are looking at other options elsewhere. There's a few talks going on at the minute with different people, but it's possible it could be the end for now. We don't know.
Fingers crossed not, mate. They're great events.
Fingers crossed, no, but it's getting harder and harder every year to keep the big companies involved. The demographic of anglers is a group of people that you don't come across anywhere else. I've never met such. I'm not going to put down the audience. I'm joking, but it's a funny breed. They're very particular about what they like and what they don't like, and it's a hard group of people to please all the time. And I think if we can't do something as good as we used to do, it's not going to be supported well enough. So, we've got options we're looking at, but I think the whole show scene needs shaking up a little bit. Everyone's got a bit bored of kind of the way it is. There hadn't been that many shows up north when we started it, and the hunger for it was incredible. Now everyone's had 10, 12 years of shows up north, and I think unless it gets freshened up severely, then we're probably going to lose money. We haven't made any money the last 2 shows anyway because of COVID and everything. So same reason why I stopped doing the Carp Cast. Like, it's a hell of a lot of effort to do for nothing.
Mate, bring it back. Well, that'll be competition, but it'd be good competition because you're the originals, mate. So you should bring it back. It was brilliant, mate.
I get a Facebook message every week now saying, please bring the Carp Cast back. But, you get a wage, I'm sure, to do what you do and the very fine job that you do. I know Simon, who used to do the Corda one, I know the wage that he used to get and his company car and everything. I was doing all that work for zero. In fact, it was costing me money a month. It was costing me £200-300 a month with the hosting and the websites and everything else. To do it for the love of it, when we were the only people doing it, I really enjoyed it. There's 25-30 carp fishing podcasts in England now. To do all that at a cost, of a couple of grand a year for myself, it's people miss it, and I get that. But pay me to do it, I'll do it.
You're the original, though, mate. You can't take that away from you, Jamie. Thank you so much, mate, for letting me into your house, for spending some time with me, for a real honest, open, very humble chat, mate. You've had some incredible captures, and this is only like the surface of it all. Before I let you go, or I get out of your house and let you have some peace,
we can make a brew.
I'm gonna give you some quick fire questions, mate. All right, you're not prepped on these.
No.
I'm good at editing, so don't worry.
Go on.
You got to pick one carp, one venue, one era.
Oh, not a personal one.
No. Which one would you go for? It could be one you've not caught. Could be absolutely anything.
There's probably two that I would pick that I find very hard to differentiate between. But the Black Mirror back in the day, I'm sure that gets said a lot. But I had a chance to fish Yateley in the very early days. So when I was on Rodney Meadow, we did touch on that earlier, didn't we? So there was a couple of lads I got friendly with. John the plumber. I'd love to meet these two guys again if they're still about fishing. There was a guy called Nick who was a winder fitter, and John the plumber I met, and they used to fish Farlows a lot, which was always on that boy leisure thing. Anyway, one day they told me about this lake called Yateley, the Carp Park lake that only had 9 fish in it, and I was like, 9 fish in the lake? That's a bit hardcore for me. Anyway, they went down to look at it one day while we were all on Rodney Meadow. Like, you coming with me? Like, it was £50 a year it was, and that was for all the lakes on the Yateley complex at the time. Anyway, I was like, how big are these fish? Like, the biggest ones are 40-pounders. I was like, I've only had one 30-pounder. I need to catch some more 30s before I fish for a 40. And I ended up not going. Anyway, obviously years later, I ended up fishing Yateley, and I wonder what would have happened if I'd have gone down there, because that was the era when all the guys were on there, your Richie McDonald's and all them. So I wonder if I'd have gone into that environment with those sort of guys fishing on that lake at the time, would my fishing have been slightly different? Because I know I'd have loved it. That is the exact sort of fishing that ticked my boxes, later on. So I didn't think I was ready for it then, but if I'd have just gone with them on that day, and all these sort of famous guys that we know now were all, and this is probably pre-Terry Hearn as well.
Jeez.
So the early Yateley, I think, would have been one. Obviously, the Black Mirror in that era, but it's a little bit cliched. They probably both are.
They're pretty good, mate. I'll give you those two. 3 celebs you'd take fishing. Could be past or present. You decide.
Fishing celebs or non-fishing celebs?
No, non-fishing. This is broad, mate.
Oh wow! So see, I've never been one that's idolised celebs. I don't have a celebrity crush either, because I'm a bit of a realist. So if I'm never going to meet that person, and even if I do meet them, they're not going to like me. So why would I ever fancy him?
Got to manifest it. I'm going to put it on the wall, mate. You know, posters of Megan Fox and the likes of, mate.
Okay, Bo Derek.
Yeah.
That shows my age.
Right, you can have that.
I think I'd like to. Who would I like to be mates with? Our famous people that seem pretty cool. I reckon Brad Pitt's a cool guy. I reckon he'd like fishing. Like the roles that he takes are not obvious. He turns down most of the kind of commercially type stuff. And I think Ricky Gervais would be a pretty good guy to be your mate. Yeah,
that'd be a night out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Boys. Here's a question: £1 million poker win, or a brand new world record carp?
Without doubt, the money.
I'm taking it to the bank.
It's only fishing.
What's your idea of carp fishing hell?
Quite a lot of British carp fishing now. I mean, I've had some hellish nights fishing. So I was out fishing in these storms. Was it 1987? you're too young to remember that, but anyone a bit older will remember it. So basically 3 people died that night, trees falling down on cars. Yeah, it was quite, one of the biggest stormy nights we've ever had in England. So I was actually fishing on this in the days where we didn't have proper equipment as well, the bed chairs that collapsed in the mud and, brollies with zips that didn't work, and I had this canvas overwrap brolly cam thing that we shared between us and 3 of our mates. Anyway, so we had the Friday off school. You could do anything for charity. This is on the day of those storms where everybody died, and we'd done a charity fish so that we could go fishing. Anyway, we got written permission off school to fish overnight, so we did 24 hours where everybody got the Friday off school to do. You could do whatever you wanted, as long as you got sponsored to raise money. So we got sponsored for fish per pound, and we fished a lake called Thornycroft Mere, which was in Cheshire. You had to walk miles over fences and stuff at the time. Anyway, we've gone there that because this storm's happened during the night, the teachers have sent a search party out looking for us because obviously it's on their watch, and these storms had happened. Obviously we're uncontactable. It's long before mobile phones. And it was horrible. We had pins trying to keep, all the zips were broke on the brolly door. The wind was battering in. We were soaking wet. It was drenched. It was literally an absolute nightmare. Like it probably was hell. We didn't know the teachers were out all night looking for us. Obviously they couldn't find us. They knew where we were, but couldn't find us. No. You got to go over gates and then across a field and over another fence to actually get to where we were. We were on the bottom lake. There was a top lake and bottom lake at Thornycroft. I think that was a pretty hellish night. But I've actually had a couple of hellish nights fishing in similar conditions, like in superstorm, wet rain, where you're holding onto the bivvy all night, you're getting no sleep, and that's probably not what you meant by hell.
No, I'll take that. Yeah, you can have that.
It's a few of them nights where bivvy's been trashed, brolly's been trashed, you're not sleeping, so you're sleep deprived, and they're normally the best nights to catch on. But the weed rafts coming in and wiping your rods out, and I've had 2 or 3 of them that scarred me.
Only fish for wrong-uns or never go carp fishing again?
Why would you not want to go fishing? Who cares? They're all wrong-uns. There's not a single fish that was born here. That its heritage was from here. All them leanies everyone goes on about, they were Dutch. Donald Leaney was bringing them from Holland. All them classic scaly linears and all that everyone gets so obsessed about. It does annoy me, that side of that elitism in carp fishing. It really annoys me. I like real things. I don't like artificially created stuff, but all that purism. We go fishing for different reasons, and when you get excited by that buzzer going like you're a little kid again, who cares if it was born in Romania?
Yeah, too right. Best rumour you've heard about yourself?
Wow.
Yes,
you're asking the right person here. I've walked round lakes, and a month later, I'm hearing stories that, Clossick's been on there, he's caught a fish, he's took him out, he's put him here, he's done that there, or there must be a 60-pounder in there, Clossick's walked around the lake. Like, I've been round it once, or sometimes I've never set foot on the lake, and I've been there and done this, or caught that, or there's been quite a few. This is a whole nother avenue you just go down. Probably not in
You've never been dead, but then you're there and alive. That's the best one I've heard, I think, when it comes to rumours of yourself.
Wow,
moving fish is all right.
Yeah, okay. No, to be honest, moving fish has never been something I've been accused of, but caught the fish or
fair dues,
or whatever. But it's sometimes I've never even set foot on a lake, but there's all sorts of rumours. I've been in there, I've caught these, or done that, or whatever. Yeah, people. The amount of times that it's happened so often that the amount of times I've met things and people know things about me that I've never done, but they know a whole elaborate story about something, and I've just not been near the lake. But yeah, there's been a few of those, especially in that northern secretive low stock type.
Circle.
Yeah, it's been a few over the years. No specific one as good as being dead.
One angler to catch a carp to save your life, who would it be, other than you?
Yeah, there's probably 3 of them. I definitely wouldn't pick me in the top 3, but I'm going to say 3 of them because all of them: John Mack, Darryl Peck, and Roger Bacon.
Yeah, fair dues, good 3 there. Final question: night out on the bank or a night in with the missus, mate?
Depends how long I've been with her.
I don't know. I don't know how to give you an answer for that.
After 12 months with her, definitely a night on the bank.
Yeah.
After 1 month with her, a night with the missus.
Nice.
Life's about balance. Like I've had a healthy balance of all of them. I've been obsessed with fishing, but I've also had years off fishing where I've been partying, I've been raving, I've done holidays abroad, I've done travelling, I've met girls that have not made me want to go fishing for a year. Like I've had a fairly even balance. I've never sacrificed everything for something, I don't think.
Fair dues. Jamie, it's been a brilliant podcast, mate. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I know you guys have enjoyed watching and listening. Thank you for watching and listening. I'll be back soon with another Nash Off the Hook podcast. Until then, Jamie Clossick, you're a star, mate. Thanks so much.
Thank you.